Chapter 1247. Some readers say that Yuan Shao's writing is too stupid. In fact, the Three Kingdoms of the Spirit Realm is set in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Yuan Shao only showed some courage once when he fought against Gongsun Zan. In other situations, he was below the standard of an ordinary person. Readers will know if you read Yuan Shao's plot in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Old Ye is not targeting him. The following text is free of charge. Yuan Shao and the strategists plan how to pursue Cao Cao after he retreated and how to cut off his escape route. Zhu Shou was deeply worried and said again, "My lord, I know a little about astronomy. Tonight, I saw Tai Bai moving in the opposite direction between Willow and Ghost. The stream of light shot into Oxen Dipper. I'm afraid that the enemy is raiding. Wu Chao is an important place for our army. My lord, you must be careful." Yuan Shao frowned and said, "I have General Chun Yuqiong with 20,000 elite troops guarding Wu Chao. How can there be a loss? Just the words of the stars are not enough." He ignored Zhu Shou. Su Dufu Mansion. The gate was originally closed, but Bai Xiaowen ordered the wing cavalry to knock on the gate. Fu Mansion did not dare to refuse and opened the gate to welcome young Master Yuan Shi. Bai Xiaowen saw the Fu family head and palace grandee Fu Wan who came to welcome him. He smiled and said, "I have an important matter to discuss with you in the middle of the night. Please don't blame me." Fu Wan was the father of Empress Fu and the current emperor's father-in-law. However, he did not dare to be arrogant in front of Bai Xiaowen. He cupped his hands and said, "I don't dare." Then he invited Bai Xiaowen into the mansion. "May I know why young master is here in the middle of the night?" Fu Wan asked carefully. Bai Xiaowen said, "I have a favor to ask of you." "Young master, please speak." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "I hope that you and the Han officials who are loyal to His Majesty can persuade His Majesty to move the capital to Yi City during the court assembly tomorrow." Fu Wan was shocked and frowned. Moving the capital must be decided by the emperor. It is not convenient for us officials to participate. Bai Xiaowen said, "You are wrong. The matter of moving the capital was related to the fate of the country and the continuation of the Han dynasty. Of course, the decision should be made by the emperor, but as an important official, the emperor's father-in-law still had the obligation to submit suggestions to the emperor. Otherwise, if everything is decided by the Son of Heaven, what is the point of having civil and military officials, the 3 dukes and 9 ministers?" These words were a bit harsh, but Fu Wan did not dare to offend Bai Xiaowen. He wanted to end the conversation, but he was also afraid of getting himself into trouble, so he did not reply. Bai Xiaowen, on the other hand, had come prepared. He unfolded an imperial edict and handed it to Fu Wan, saying, "Guizhang, please take a look at this imperial edict." Fu Wan hurriedly took it and looked at it. It turned out to be a bandit summon. "What does young master mean by sending me an edict?" Fu Wan was somewhat puzzled. Actually, he could also guess that after Yuan Shi took over Shudu, he would definitely urge the emperor to issue an imperial edict to attack the Chao dynasty in order to gain a righteous name. This was just a basic operation after taking over Shudu. What Fu Wan did not understand was why Bai Xiaowen wanted to show him this imperial edict. Could it be that there was some other mystery in the imperial edict? He carefully read it again, but could not see any problems. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Guizhang, there is no need to look at it anymore. The problem is not within the imperial edict, but outside of it." Bai Xiaowen slowly got up and paced back and forth in the room. He slowly said, "The granaries of Shudu have already been burned down. The 20,000 Yuzhou soldiers that I lead do not have any provisions to defend the city. As such, Shudu cannot be defended and must return. In other words, Shudu will definitely fall back into the hands of the Chao army. When the time comes, this bandit summon will be seen by Cao Cao. Do you think the story of clothes with an imperial edict will repeat itself?" Fu Wan was alarmed. The clothes with an imperial edict incident had caused Cao Cao to capture people all over the city. Heads rolled and blood flowed like rivers. All the civil and military officials were in danger. He reluctantly said, This bandit summon was written by His Majesty, there is no other official's signature. Even if Cao Cao wants to kill people, he will not implicate the civil and military officials of the court. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "That's right. Cao Cao will not vent his anger on the civil and military officials of the court. He will only vent his anger on His Majesty. However, His Majesty is someone that Cao Cao does not dare to kill." Then, "Guizhang, do you think Cao Cao will vent his anger on someone around His Majesty? Killing a chicken to warn the monkey so that His Majesty will not dare to have any other thoughts?" Fu Wan's face suddenly turned pale. He had already thought of the consequences. He hissed, "You urged His Majesty to write a bandit summon, causing the Fu family to suffer greatly." Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "Guizhang, you are wrong. If His Majesty wants to stay in Shudu, it will fall back into Cao Cao's hands sooner or later. In that case, the Fu family will definitely suffer. However, if Guizhang can work with the officials to persuade His Majesty to move the capital, no matter how fierce Cao Cao is, he will not be able to do anything to you." Fu Wan's expression changed as he said with difficulty, "I am only a palace grandee. I do not have any prestige. How can I persuade the officials of the court?" Bai Xiaowen shook his head again. "The people that the emperor trusts the most are not the civil and military officials of the court because most of them are Cao Cao's trusted aides. Only the few that are truly loyal to him are the ones that he trusts the most. As for you, Guizhang, who offered His Majesty the imperial edict and caused the death of concubine Dong's entire family, you are the best person to unite these loyal officials." This sentence scared Fu Wan. His face turned ashen. "Why do you say that? The matter of offering His Majesty the imperial edict has nothing to do with me." Bai Xiaowen smiled and recited, "Empress, Emperor, Empress, Empress, Empress. I have one person who can get rid of the country. If it is not a relative of the Emperor, who would be willing to be loyal to him? I do not have the authority to do this. I can entrust His Majesty the imperial uncle, Dong Cheng. I have a plan. His Majesty can make a collar, take a jade belt and give it to Dong Cheng. However, he can sew a secret edict inside the belt to give it to Dong Cheng." Fu Wan's face was ashen white and cold sweat dripped down. He thought to himself, only the Empress and the three of us knew about the plot that day. How did this Yuanshi know about it? Every word he said is similar to what I said that day. I heard that he is proficient in Taoism and that he once destroyed Zhang Jiao and Liaodong. Sure enough, he has an unpredictable plan. Bai Xiaowen was secretly pleased. As an awakened one, he could finally play the role of a prophet in one of the few historical planes. It was important to note that the creation of the Three Kingdoms plane was determined by the popularity of the story. Looking at the biographies of the Three Kingdoms plane, there was no story that was more popular than the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Therefore, the characters, abilities, personalities, and speaking styles of the Three Kingdoms plane were the closest to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. For example, Zhao Yun's ability value. According to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Qinshu, Zhao Yun was not outstanding. There were only a few lines of rough description. Later on, there was Pei Song's Yun Bizhuan. Although there were descriptions of Zhao Yun protecting his master in Dangyang and defeating the enemy in Hanzhong, which made Zhao Yun's image more complete, it was definitely not as high as the Zhao Yun in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms was different from history. However, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms was basically the same as the Three Kingdoms of the spiritual realm. The only difference was that the characters appeared and left at different times, as well as the influence of awakened ones. Bai Xiaowen had a super brain. He could memorize the Romance of the Three Kingdoms after reading it once. As for the events that had already happened, it was not a problem for him to play the role of a prophet. Bai Xiaowen was quite disdainful of this Fu Wan. This old man, if you say he was not loyal to the emperor, he would take the initiative to give advice. If you say he was loyal, he would be timid and entrust dangerous matters to others. Poor concubine Dong did not know anything. She died in the hands of Cao Cao when she was 5 months pregnant. Later, Empress Fu wanted to get rid of Cao Cao. She wrote a letter to Fu Wan asking for his help. In the end, Fu Wan did not dare to form a group and plot a rebellion like Dongcheng and came up with an idea. He asked Emperor Xian to send a secret edict to Sun Lu. They would attack Cao Cao together and wait until Su Du was empty before taking action. However, this time, before the secret edict was written, it was discovered by Cao Cao. He found the letter that Empress Fu wrote to Fu Wan. This led to Fu Wan's entire family being killed. Even Empress Fu was not spared. Bai Xiaowen thought about it carefully. He felt that although Fu Wan was loyal to Emperor Xian of Han, he still put his own safety first and was not loyal to the death. However, he was the most trusted by Emperor Xian of Han. Therefore, the matter of moving the capital fell on him. Chapter 1248. The way Fu Wan looked at Bai Xiaowen was a little weird. Bai Xiaowen was really calm and smiled. If the emperor stays in Shudu, he will be harmed by Cao Cao. The Fu family will also follow in the footsteps of Uncle Dong. On the contrary, if you are willing to help and persuade the emperor to move the capital to Yi City, I, Yuan Shi, will use my father's name to guarantee that the Fu family will prosper for 3 generations. During the Three Kingdoms era, parents were really important. Bai Xiaowen's words were really powerful to Fu Wan, but to Bai Xiaowen, only he knew how powerful they were. Fu Wan took in a deep breath and exhaled. If you invite the emperor to Yi City, will you be willing to follow him? If you become the second Cao Cao, I would rather die than follow your orders. Bai Xiaowen's face was really serious. My Yuan family has been blessed by the emperor for generations. How can we be as arrogant as Cao Cao? Fu Wan nodded and sighed. Since that's the case, I'm willing to try. Bai Xiaowen nodded in satisfaction. You are a wise person. Tomorrow will be the court assembly, so you can do it quickly. After saying goodbye, Bai Xiaowen rushed back to the Prime Minister's manor. When he saw Sun again, this heavenly strategies assistant advisor did not panic when surrounded by a group of soldiers. Instead, he sat cross-legged and closed his eyes without saying a word. Cao Cao's family members and servants were all sobbing. Cao Cao's wife, Lady Bian, sobbed and asked, Lord Sun, do my 4 sons still have a way out? Sun got up and bowed. I am useless. Who knows how Yuan Shi will deal with the 4 of them? Bian cried even louder, and she nearly fainted. Luckily, Rin and the others helped her up. Sun sighed and sat on the ground once more. Suddenly, a Yuzhou soldier appeared and ordered, Sun, the young master invites you in. Sun opened his eyes and said to Bian, the safety of the 4 young masters and how the Prime Minister's family will be dealt with will be known soon. My condolences to you and make preparations. When Bai Xiaowen saw Sun again, he praised, your husband's qi cultivation skill is not shallow. Young master, you're too kind. Sun bowed with a humble bearing. The more Bai Xiaowen looked at Sun, the more satisfied he was. He said, Cao Cao's days are numbered. Why don't you choose another master? Assisting the Grand General? Sun faintly smiled, shook his head, and said, Young master, do you know that I escaped from the Great General? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said seriously, assist me. Sun said, Great General Yuan Shao is in his prime. Although the young master was a hero, he would still need at least 20 years to inherit the position. Moreover, young master doesn't seem to be the eldest son. Bai Xiaowen said, otherwise, if the all is in the bag, sooner or later it will show its edge. If I want to achieve greatness and rule the world, I can do it myself. Why would I need father's inheritance? Sun was shocked. Bai Xiaowen laughed and said, what do you think? Do you think I can assist you? In the end, Sun Moran still shook his head and said, I have received great kindness from the Prime Minister and will definitely not do anything to betray him. If the young master wants to kill me, please do so. Bai Xiaowen shook his head, young master Sun is a great talent. How can I bear to kill you? However, tomorrow I will return to Yi City under the command of the emperor. If there are any officials in the court who do not obey, they will be regarded as traitor Chao's henchmen. His Majesty will decide how to deal with them. Sun's eyes seemed to be filled with disbelief. His Majesty might not move the capital so easily. Are you trying to trick me? Or are you trying to use force to coerce the emperor? Bai Xiaowen laughed. You are the Minister of Justice in tomorrow's court meeting. You also need to participate. We will see when the time comes. Seeing that Bai Xiaowen was about to leave, Sun hurriedly asked, Young master, please wait. Why don't I see the Prime Minister's 4 sons? Did the young master break your promise and harm them? Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, Why do you care so much about these 4 people? Sun sighed, I am already deeply sorry for not being able to complete the Prime Minister's task. If his sons are also harmed, how can I be at ease? Bai Xiaowen squinted his eyes and smiled, Since that is the case, I have a suggestion. Is your majesty willing? Sun frowned, Young master, please speak. Bai Xiaowen said a few words in a low voice. Sun's face was filled with disbelief. Young master will not keep your promise. Why are you playing with me? Bai Xiaowen said, You can make an oath. If you go against it, you will be punished by the heavens. Court meeting. Emperor Xian of Han sat at the top of the court, looking at the officials kneeling and cheering. Without Cao Cao as an eyesore, Emperor Xian of Han felt really comfortable. Thinking about Cao Cao, Emperor Xian of Han quickly looked for Yuan Shi. He could not find him. Very good. Yuan Shi followed his role and waited outside the hall. Although the guards on duty were all wing cavalrymen under Yuan Shi's command, and Yuan Shi's action was purely deceiving himself, it was undeniable that appearances were very useful in many cases. The atmosphere of the court meeting was different from usual. The officials who usually talked loudly and were regarded as part of the Chao family all lowered their heads and looked at their feet, afraid that others would notice them. If they could, these Chao family officials wanted to say that they were sick. However, they could not do so. Now that Shudu was under the control of the Yuzhou army, this was the first court meeting under the control of Yuan Shi. They had to go even if they wanted to. Emperor Xian of Han looked at the officials below, suppressing the excitement in his heart. Dear officials, what is the matter for today's court meeting? Fu Wan came out and said, Your Majesty, Great General Yuan Shao's son, Yuan Shi, is both smart and brave. He defeated Cao Cao and recovered Shudu. Your Majesty should summon him into the palace and reward him accordingly. Emperor Xian of Han said, Allow it. Immediately, the eunuch summoned the Yuzhou provincial governor, Yuan Shi, for an audience. Bai Xiaowen entered the court meeting. He was really courteous, and he bowed toward the emperor. The officials all whispered to each other, and the main topic was how did Yuan Shao have such a good son? And so on. Even Sun looked at Bai Xiaowen a few more times. Who knows if it was an illusion, but today's Yuan Shi looked even more radiant than yesterday. Although Bai Xiaowen did not have the charm buff of Jinmi, the buff of the peony leaf painting was enough. Immediately, Emperor Xian of Han rewarded Bai Xiaowen, giving him the title of North Conquering General and Marquis of Guanyi. Apart from the Marquis title being newly conferred, his military promotion was also written in the imperial edict. After Fu Wan brought Bai Xiaowen into the court meeting, he returned to his office. After Bai Xiaowen thanked him, he bowed and mentioned the matter of moving the capital to Yi City. When Emperor Xian of Han heard that, he felt a little depressed. He wanted to put this matter aside and watch Yuan Shao and Cao Cao fight to the death. It would be best if Bai Xiaowen helped him defend Shudu. However, what Bai Xiaowen said was the truth. Shudu's grain was burned, and there was no way to defend it. Emperor Xian of Han could only look at the officials and ask for their opinions. Minister Geng Ji stepped out, Your Majesty, Shudu is the base of Cao Cao, and we can't stay here for long. Minister Wei Huang stepped out, If Shudu is broken, Cao Cao will definitely rush over. Your Majesty should move to Yi City to avoid Cao Cao's army. A bunch of officials flashed past beside him and tried to persuade him. Most of their words were to persuade the emperor to move to Yi City. Emperor Xian of Han looked at these people. Although he could not be sure whether or not they were loyal to the Han dynasty, at least they were not Cao Cao's henchmen. They were the few officials in the court who did not praise Cao Cao. Emperor Xian of Han was a little hesitant. He looked at Fu Wan, What do you think? Fu Wan bowed, Your Majesty, since Cao Cao brought you to Shudu, he has been getting more and more arrogant. Last time, he massacred loyal people and caused the death of the imperial concubine. His Majesty had issued an imperial edict this time, ordering the heroes to punish the thief. If he stayed in Sudu, then when that thief Chao returned, he would definitely not let His Majesty off. Hence, the matter of moving the capital is urgent, and we cannot hesitate. When Emperor Xian of Han saw that the loyal officials in his heart were all saying that, he finally made up his mind, let's follow your words and move to Yi City. Chapter 1249. Although the officials under the Chao family had different opinions, they did not dare to speak up. Bai Xiaowen said, when the emperor moves, the officials should follow. Fu Wan and the other officials all expressed that they were willing to follow the emperor up north toward the new capital Yi City. However, there were still many people who were not willing. An old official knelt down and said, I'm old, and I'm not used to Yi City. I'm afraid I can't follow you. Please give me my bones to return to my hometown. With someone taking the lead, there would be others following. Many people knelt down in the hall. Those officials under the Chao family also took the chance to join in. Fu Wan looked at Bai Xiaowen, Yuan Jingbei, how do you think we should deal with these people who want to return? Bai Xiaowen waved his hand, you shouldn't be asking me that. Now that His Majesty is in court, as officials, how can we make decisions? Don't blame me for being unloyal and treat me like Dong Zhuo and Cao Cao. Fu Wan quickly explained, I'm not asking you to make a decision. I'm just asking for your suggestion. The final decision is naturally in his hands. Bai Xiaowen smiled, you're a loyal official, I've wronged you. You're asking for a suggestion, but I wonder if these officials would dare to do the same in front of Cao Cao. Minister Geng raged, they're obviously trying to force the ruler and still have hope for Cao Cao. Emperor Xian looked at the officials kneeling on the ground, and the rage in his heart continued to spread. Bai Xiaowen and the others' words reminded him. When Cao Cao was in power, why didn't these officials return home? When Cao Cao killed the concubines, they also did not beg for mercy. The feeling of being in power for the first time made Emperor Xian even more emotional, and he could not think rationally. All of you are obviously Cao Cao's henchmen. Emperor Xian slapped the table and stood up. He pointed at the officials kneeling in the hall, don't think that I don't know what you've done. You are all paid by the emperor and should be loyal to the emperor. When the country is in danger, you don't think of repaying the emperor. Instead, you gather people to threaten me. You. Emperor Xian of Han took in a deep breath and said sternly, anyone who is not willing to go up north will be treated as Cao Cao's people. Where is Yuan Shi, the general of the northern expedition? Present. I order you to escort the remaining members of the Chao family to the drill ground and behead them. Those who commit heinous crimes will be exterminated. Bai Xiaowen was not surprised by Emperor Xian of Han's actions. Emperor Xian of Han had accumulated a lot of hatred in his heart. Last night, when they met, he had insisted on killing Sun Yu and the other officials of the Prime Minister's manor. Today, in the main hall, the officials did not give him any face and were unwilling to follow. It would be strange if Emperor Xian of Han could tolerate this. There were 3 advantages to Bai Xiaowen's decision. First of all, the officials had to move the capital. Otherwise, if there was only an emperor without an army, his prestige would be greatly reduced. Cao Cao could even say that the emperor Bai Xiaowen kidnapped was a fake emperor. He could then rely on the officials in Shudu to establish another court. Secondly, Bai Xiaowen's act of returning power to Emperor Xian of Han would make Emperor Xian of Han feel at ease. This would make him more determined to move the capital up north. Lastly, Bai Xiaowen would hide behind the scenes and let Emperor Xian of Han be the bad guy. This would make Emperor Xian of Han's image in the eyes of the officials even worse. This would make it easier for him to control Yi City. On the other hand, letting Bai Xiaowen directly offend the officials would not be good for his reputation. In the 3 kingdoms, was reputation important? According to Bai Xiaowen's understanding, before one became powerful, reputation was important. Only when one became a warlord and had strong subordinates would one have the right to not care about reputation. However, even if one reached that step, having a good reputation was still better than having a bad reputation. Cao Cao had the capital to be willful because he had more than 10 years to build up his power in the three kingdoms. On the other hand, the awakened ones did not. The atmosphere in the hall was solemn. Emperor Xian of Han's anger did not make the officials feel guilty. However, when Bai Xiaowen stood up with his hand on his sword and his killing intent was contained, they could not help but feel fear. "Your Majesty, you have misunderstood me. I am not a member of the Chao family. I am willing to sacrifice my life to prove my loyalty. Why would I follow you? This is my duty and I am willing to go," a few officials hurriedly said. It was funny. The first to change their stance and express their willingness to follow Emperor Xian of Han North were the officials of the pro-Chao faction. The ministers who were originally part of the neutral faction, on the other hand, were reserved and did not change their minds immediately. Later, more and more people changed their minds and obeyed. Most of the ministers of the neutral faction expressed their willingness to follow the crowd and migrate with the army. However, in the end, there were still 10 or so old officials who thought that they were quite famous and did not change their stance. They insisted that they would not be able to bear the journey and begged to return home. It was worth mentioning that Sun Yu was not among them. He did not make any move to retire from the start. This made many people feel weird. However, at such an intense moment, no one had the time or courage to question Sun Yu. Towards those 10 or so stubborn officials, Bai Xiaowen did not show any mercy. These stubborn old officials were not as easy to manage as the pro-Chao officials who had changed their words. Immediately, Bai Xiaowen ordered the winged cavalry to imprison these 10 old officials and follow the emperor's orders to wipe out their families. Not to mention how vicious Bai Xiaowen was, Cao Cao was much more vicious than him. In the romance of the three kingdoms, there was only one case of Shudu being set on fire. There were only a few main culprits, but Cao Cao had already started a massacre. All the officials in the court were killed until the river turned red. Furthermore, Cao Cao personally gave the order. On Bai Xiaowen's side, at least Emperor Xian of Han helped him take the blame. The court assembly ended very quickly, and the officials all returned home. Under the supervision of the Yuzhou soldiers, they rushed their families to set off. Every household did not need to pack any luggage and only brought rations. The officials could only bring their in-laws. As for the servants and maids, they were all dismissed and could not follow the army. All of a sudden, Shudu was filled with cries. Everywhere one looked, there were scenes of separation. Bai Xiaowen was not moved. A city full of cries was better than a city full of mourning. Under the orders of Emperor Xian of Han, it didn't matter whether there was such an order or not. Bai Xiaowen raided Cao Cao's house and obtained a small amount of gold and money, which couldn't be brought out of this dimension, as well as many treasures from the treasury. Unfortunately, they didn't have ownership rights, couldn't be brought out of this dimension. Looking at the time, it had been 12 hours since they took over the Prime Minister's manor and the palace. The hero side quest was completed. As Bai Xiaowen took over the city quickly, the reinforcements from the Yuzhou prefectures had not yet arrived. This was the reason why the hero side quest did not have a difficulty rating. It would change based on the awakened's choice. Bai Xiaowen quickly received a notification. Quest reward: obtain ownership rights to one of the Prime Minister's treasures. Additional reward: for every 12 hours you occupy Shudu, you will obtain ownership rights to one of the Prime Minister's treasures. Chapter 1250. The treasures in the Prime Minister's mansion were actually high-value items obtained from Cao Cao's treasure vault. Bai Xiaowen ordered his soldiers to place the looted treasures in front of him. These things look very ordinary. Cecilia picked up a piece of cloth woven with golden thread, shook her head, and put it down again. Apart from being gorgeous, it had no defensive properties. Was this even considered equipment? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, before obtaining ownership, the treasure and the awaken will not resonate, so we shouldn't be able to see its specific properties. Only after making a choice can we see its properties before we can use it. There were a lot of treasures. For example, the one in Cecilia's hand was called Golden Lace Garment. Next to it was a Sichuan brocade battle robe. Next to it was a short knife inlaid with 7 gems called 7-star treasure knife. In addition to the equipment, there were also some silk books and ancient books. The most eye-catching one was a volume of Mengda's new book. How should we choose? His teammates looked at Bai Xiaowen. If they could see the specific properties of the treasures, it would be fine. If they couldn't, it was basically a blind guess. Bai Xiaowen thought for a moment and said, I can guess some of the properties of different types of treasures. For example, this golden lace garment and this Sichuan brocade battle robe should be at least the best gold grade, or even dark gold grade equipment. As for this 7-star treasure knife. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Cao Cao assassinated Dong Zhuo in the name of offering a treasure knife. Then, this 7-star treasure knife is very likely to be a souvenir that he later obtained. Weapons like this that are widely circulated in later generations are almost certainly dark gold grade. Speaking of dark gold equipment, his teammates' eyes lit up. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, Don't worry. The specific choice depends on what our team needs. Let's not consider the golden lace garment and other equipment. The 7-star treasure knife is indeed very tempting. If we choose, it may strengthen Shui or Hansu. But I still want to choose this one, Mengda's new book. Bai Xiaowen picked up the scroll and said, Now, our team is going to kill our way back to Ji province from Yu province, which is controlled by Cao Cao. It would be fine if there were no burdens, but we have to bring along the emperor and the officials. Otherwise, there would be no meaning in destroying the capital this time. Therefore, it is inevitable that our marching speed will be slowed down. We will also encounter the Cao army and engage in battle. Men's new book is most likely a large-scale war tool. With its fame in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, it wouldn't be strange for it to become a gold item. It should be of the greatest help to our team. Qiao Rui and the other teammates nodded. As for the additional rewards of the hero side quest, everyone knew that they couldn't covet the rewards and stay behind. My team's highest goal was to unify the 3 dimensions, not to leave after getting some benefits. If they were surrounded by Cao Cao's army for the sake of 1 or 2 more treasures, they would lose the good start they had in the 3 dimensions, as well as the reputation they had accumulated. The most important thing was to head north to Jizhou and clean up the mess. Therefore, there was only one treasure to choose from. Bai Xiaowen chose Men's new book. A flash of light that only the awakened ones could see flashed. The silk book automatically floated up and fell into Bai Xiaowen's palm. The spiritual realm's law prompt message, you have obtained a B-class gold item, Men's new book. Men's new book, you can choose one of the following strategies and activate it. If you do so, you will consume 1 use of Men's new book. The current number of uses is 7/7. When all uses are used up, the item will disappear. There was a series of strategies below. Quench thirst at the sight of plum flowers. After use, the morale of all surrounding allied troops +10 and all HP are temporarily restored. The morale and HP increase will continue to decrease. Every 30 minutes, 1 point of morale and 30 points of HP are decreased. Farm system. After use, the speed of land reclamation in the territory for this quarter is increased by 100% and the grain output is increased by 30%. Speed is a crucial asset in war. After use, the movement speed of all surrounding allied troops is increased by 50% and stamina consumption is reduced by 50%. Lasts for 120 minutes. This effect does not stack with other group movement speed increasing items. Poem, Head of Cutting Hair. There were a total of 7 such strategies. They were all various deeds of Cao Cao and the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Many of them had not happened in the Three Kingdoms. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and laughed. Men's new book was originally a military strategy book and was also Cao Cao's proud work. He did not expect that after it was turned into a tool, it was actually a collection of Cao Cao's various tricks and romantic deeds. For example, Poem with Spear should not be considered a strategy, but it was actually treated as a strategy. He did not know if it was a bad taste of the spiritual realm's law. this B-grade gold item could be used up to 7 times. Therefore, the power of each strategy was not too heaven-defying. However, for Bai Xiaowen, with the strategy of speed as a crucial asset in war, he had already achieved the goal of choosing Men's new book. The only regret was that it could not stack with Xiahou Yuan's military strategy of changing battles and the other military strategy book that Bai Xiaowen had previously obtained. Suddenly, a soldier came to report that Sun Yu had brought 3 Confucian scholars to visit him. Bai Xiaowen immediately smiled and said, "My concubine is here." He immediately stood up to welcome them. Sun Yu bowed and said, "Young Master Yuan, I have already fulfilled my promise. I hope you will not go back on your word." Bai Xiaowen glanced at the 3 Confucian scholars behind Sun Yu. The 3 of them were an old man, a middle-aged man, and a young man. There was a clear hierarchy. The old man was called Lu Gui, the middle-aged man was called Dong Zhao, and the young man was called Sima Yi. Your son did not fail the promise, so naturally, I will not fail the promise. Bai Xiaowen waved his hand and gave the order. Immediately, the Yuzhou soldiers escorted Chao Pai, Chao Ji, Chao Zhang, and Chao Chong over. The 4 of them were not treated harshly, and their complexions were still considered good. However, it was inevitable that they were frightened. Chao Pai, Chao Ji, and the other adult heirs had fear on their faces. On the other hand, Chao Chong was young and was rather fearless. Bai Xiaowen said, "His Majesty deeply hates the 4 of you. Originally, he wanted to behead the 4 of you and Cao Cao's family in public, but I saved you." After pausing for a moment, Bai Xiaowen continued, "Don't misunderstand. I don't have any good feelings towards you. The reason why I spared your lives was because of Lord Sun." The 4 of them looked at Sun Yu with puzzled expressions. Sun Yu sighed and bowed. "For young masters, please take care. I will be going to Yi City on this trip. From now on, I will not be able to assist Lord Chao." The 4 Chao sons were shocked, and then their expressions turned to one of disdain. Chao Ji sneered and said, "Lord Sun, are you going to join another master?" Chapter 1251. Cao Cao's 4 sons all had different expressions on their faces. Most of them were stunned. Sun Yu said, "Second young master, why do you need me to tell you the whole story?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Your father's family is based in Yingchuan. If you don't tell me, the Suns will be killed by Cao Cao. Your father's reputation will also be damaged. The Suns of Yingchuan were a big family. They were not in Shudu, so they couldn't go north with the army. They had to stay." Sun Yu had mixed feelings. He cupped his hands and said, "Second young master, how can I make you worry so much?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and looked at Cao Cao's 4 sons. He narrowed his eyes and said, "You 4 better get a doctor to treat you." Chao Zhang stared and said, "What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" Bai Xiaowen laughed and shook his head. "You were poisoned and you don't know? If you don't find a doctor, you will die sooner or later even if I let you go. When the time comes, you might push the blame on me." Under Bai Xiaowen's insight, he could see that Chao Pai and the other 3 were all poisoned. The poison would take 3 days to 5 days. As soon as these words were spoken, not only did the expressions of Chao Pai and the others turn grim, even Sun Yu revealed a surprised and bewildered expression. They didn't suspect Bai Xiaowen of poisoning them. If it was Bai Xiaowen, there was no need to say it. "Who wants to harm my brothers?" Chao Zhang asked. Sun Yu wanted to say something but stopped. Bai Xiaowen laughed and said, "You should ask your father. He must know the answer." Bai Xiaowen let Cecilia and Han Su lead the winged cavalry as the vanguard. He personally led the army and escorted the emperor's carriage to the north. Qiao Rui was beside Bai Xiaowen. "I understand your intention, but there are still many things I don't understand," Qiao Rui said. Bai Xiaowen blinked and said, "Tell me what you know first." Chao Pai and the other 3 were poisoned by Chao Xiong from the Divine Court training camp, right? Qiao Rui said, "You let Chao Pai and the others go because you want to prevent Chao Xiong from becoming the successor of the Chao's group." At the same time, you can also get Sun Yu and the other 3 talents to submit to you. Bai Xiaowen nodded. But why did you bring the emperor and the officials back to Yi City? Are you so sure that the situation will go according to your plan, that Yuan Shao will be defeated by Cao Cao? After all, we have already launched a surprise attack on Sudu, causing Cao Cao to panic. The direction of the Battle of Guandu might not follow the path of the romance of the 3 kingdoms. After a pause, Qiao Rui continued, even if Yuan Shao loses, he will return to Yi City and try to regroup. In the romance of the 3 kingdoms, Yuan Shao died of an illness after being defeated in a battle. But with the physique of the people in the spiritual realm, he shouldn't have died of illness, right? You didn't inform Yuan Shao in advance and brought the imperial court to Yi City. How are you going to deal with them then? These 2 points puzzled Qiao Rui the most. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, the reason why I did this is that I am sure of 2 things. First, Cao Cao will definitely not withdraw immediately, which is equivalent to a slow death. He must adopt Su Yu's plan to defeat Yuan Shao and then return to Yi City. Second, Yuan Shao will definitely be defeated and die in the Battle of Guandu. Qiao Rui was not surprised by the first point. After all, when the Yuzhou army set off, they received the information about Guandu sent by the Li Shui. They knew that Su Yu had proposed a plan and was reprimanded. The subsequent developments were naturally traceable. But Qiao Rui still did not believe the second point. Bai Xiaowen looked at Qiao Rui's puzzled eyes and said with a smile, Sister Qiao, you only need to think about their plan from the perspective of the Divine Court, and you will understand. Think about it, why did the Divine Court give up defending Sudu? Qiao Rui quickly said, in order to sell their teammates, they sold Cao Cao's 4 sons so that Cao Xiong could be the only heir. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, that's right. Cao Xiong thought that his competitors were all going to die, so he would try his best to preserve the strength of the Chao's group. Defeating Yuan Shao is the overall situation for the Divine Court, so the focus of the Awakeners of the Divine Court must be on the Battle of Guandu. At the same time, they strategically gave up Sudu and poisoned Cao Pai and others. Under normal circumstances, whether we defend Sudu or lead the army north to Yi City, we will have Cao Cao's 4 sons in our hands. During this period, they will die from the poison, and we will undoubtedly be blamed for it. Cao Xiong will definitely work hard to make contributions to the War of Unification and to smoothly take over the power of the Chao's group. He defeated Liu Biao and Sudu, which was just the first battle, and Guandu was his big stage. Therefore, Cao Xiong would never let go of Yuan Shao, this big head, no matter what. As long as we can kill Yuan Shao, Cao Xiong's reputation in the Chao's group will soar to the level of reverence or even worship. As long as we find a chance to kill Cao Cao, he will be the well-deserved leader of the camp. Speaking of this, Bai Xiaowen's eyes were gloomy as he said slowly, moreover, in order to ensure Yuan Shao's death, I also made a backup plan. Of course, with the strength of the Divine Court, this backup plan will not be used, and I don't want to go to this step. This backup plan was Li Shui. When the Yuzhou army was about to embark on the way back, Bai Xiaowen could almost foresee that the Emperor's imperial carriage would be crazily chased and intercepted by the defenders of the Chao's group. Along the way, there would definitely be a lot of battles. At this juncture, he sent Li Shui, a powerful force, to Guandu to deliver an edict. What was his intention? It was self-evident. However, if Li Shui intercepted and killed Yuan Shao, the consequences would be very serious. Yuan Shao must be accompanied by defeated soldiers. No matter how strong Li Shui was, he could only assassinate at most if he was alone. He could not kill all the defeated soldiers. Once he took action, Li Shui's identity would be useless, and it might also affect Yuan Shi's identity. After all, Li Shui was Yuan Shi's subordinate, which would add a trace of unfavorable influence to Bai Xiaowen's follow-up plan. Qiao Rui exhaled deeply. In Bai Xiaowen's meticulous analysis, there was almost no way to hide the plan of the Awakened from the Divine Court. And Bai Xiaowen's response could be said to be perfect. Closely following the plan of the Divine Court's Awakened, he formulated the response plan that would benefit him the most. At the same time, Bai Xiaowen did not forget to feed the divine courts awakened a mouthful of shit, let Chow Pai and the other three go back, and reminded them that they were poisoned. It was no longer important whether Chow Pai and the other three would die from the poison. The important thing was that Bai Xiaowen's attitude of letting the four go had already proved his innocence. Chow Chow was definitely not a fool. His 4 sons had died mysteriously. He would never suspect Yuan Shi, but Chow Xiong. Of course, it was best that Chow Pai and the other 3 were alive. This depended on what kind of doctor they could find. According to the common sense that people in the spiritual world had more powerful secondary professions than awakened ones, the famous doctors in the 3 kingdoms should be able to cure Chow Pai and the others. Back to Bai Xiaowen's side. After completing the task of surprise attacking Su Du, Bai Xiaowen's reputation in Yuan Shao's camp had risen to reverence. It was so high that he could submit the second main task at any time, but he did not do so. It could be said that among Yuan Shao's 3 sons, the second son, Yuan Shi, was already outstanding. His image among the civil and military officials of Yuan Shao's camp was far better than that of the other 2 sons. This image was accumulated from the suppression of Liao Dong, the killing of Zhang Jiao, the surprise attack on Su Du, and so on. In addition, there was also the upcoming battle of returning from Su Du. As long as the plan succeeded, Bai Xiaowen was almost certain to be the master of the Yuan family's forces. Qiao Rui understood very quickly. She sighed softly, "I understand. Now our main task is to escort the emperor and the officials back to Yi City successfully." Chapter 1252. This chapter uses part of the plot of the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms. This battle can't be skipped. Old you wrote it briefly, please don't mind. Guandu. Cao Cao ordered Cao Xiong to lead the army under the banner of Yuan Shao's general Jiang Qi and rush to Wuchao at night. Su told Cao Xiong all the passwords of Yuan Shao's army in advance. In addition, Su knew Yuan Shao's background, so the fake identity Jiang Qi was the least likely to arouse suspicion. When Cao Xiong arrived at Wuchao and saw the granary, he set fire to it as planned. Although Yuan Shao's general Chen Yuqiong was also a rare leader with high combat strength, he was still easily defeated by Cao Xiong's divine court awakeners when he was drunk. The difference between this and the Romance of the 3 Kingdoms was that Cao Xiong didn't keep Chen Yuqiong as a captive. Chen Yuqiong's deputies, Zhao Rui and others, happened to be transporting grain back. Originally, Cao Xiong's army was attacked from both sides and was in a bad situation. However, Cao Xiong showed his powerful strength. A flashing lightning spear hit Zhao Yuanjin's vital point and killed him instantly. His personal generals also roused their spirits and worked together to kill Zhao Rui. Wuchao's Yuan army lost their general and deputy. Their morale was greatly reduced and they scattered. Cao Cao saw Cao Xiong's heroic appearance and sighed. "I thought Huang Su'er, referring to Cao Zhang, was already the most courageous. I didn't expect Cao Xiong to be even more courageous." When Cao Cao said this sentence, his eyes were very complicated. However, the night was dark and no one noticed. Following which, Cao Cao ordered Cao Xiong's troops to wear the Yuan army's armor and pretend to be the defeated Wuchao soldiers to head towards the path of the Yuan army. Yuan Shao was in the tent at night. When he saw the fire in Wuchao's direction, he knew that Wuchao was lost and hurriedly called the civil and military generals to discuss. Only Zhu Shou was missing in the tent. It turned out that after Zhu Shou reminded Yuan Shao of the danger of Wuchao, he was reprimanded by Yuan Shao and was angry. Yuan Shao happened to feel guilty and was ashamed to meet Zhu Shou. Yuan Shao didn't force him to come out because of illness. General Zhang Ji stepped out and said, "I'm willing to lead the troops to save Wuchao. I only need General Gaolan to come with me." Before Yuan Shao could say anything, Guotu suggested, "My lord, if Cao Cao came to burn the grain, the camp would definitely be empty. Besieging Wei to save Zhao is a brilliant plan. Why don't you follow suit and send Zhang He and Gaolan to rob the Cao army camp?" Zhang He said, "Cao Cao is resourceful, his army is vast. If the other party is prepared in the camp and we fail to take down the camp, Wu Chao Chinyu Cheong will be defeated and our army will be in danger. Yuan Shao was still hesitant. Guotu repeatedly asked for instructions. Cao Cao only cared about robbing the grain and would definitely go personally. How could there be many soldiers and horses left in the camp? My lord, strike quickly and don't miss. Yuan Shao decided to send Zhang He and Gao Lan to raid the Chao camp. He also sent Jiang Qi to lead 10,000 men to save Wu Chao. This was the embodiment of Cao Cao's wisdom. On a secluded path, Cao Xiong happened to meet Jiang Qi. When he was questioned by Jiang Qi, Cao Xiong said that he was from the Wu Chao army. Jiang Qi was not surprised. When the two armies passed each other, Cao Xiong hollered and stabbed a spear into Jiang Qi's back. Lightning seeped in and Jiang Qi was knocked off his horse. Jiang Qi was a general of the Chao army and was not drunk like Chinyu Cheong. Although he was ambushed, he was not killed instantly. However, he had lost his warhorse and was surrounded by Cao Xiong, Zhang Liao, and Su Chu. How could he survive? On the other side, Zhang He and Gao Lan went to raid the Chao camp. In the end, Cao Cao left Xiao Dun, Cao Ren, and Cao Hong to defend. Since Zhang He and Gao Lan failed to raid the camp, the Chao army that ambushed Wu Chao charged back under Cao Cao's command. Zhang He and Gao Lan fought to the death. Luckily, the two of them were good at leading their troops and their morale did not drop. Only then did they manage to break out of the encirclement. However, they had lost more than half of their men. Zhang He said, "If my lord had listened to me, we would not have lost like this." Gao Lan said, "This is all because Guotu's plan did not work. When we return to the camp, we will explain everything to him and let my lord know who is right and who is wrong." In Guotu's tent, he heard that Wu Chao had been burned down, that the Chao army had returned, and that Zhang He and Gao Lan had been defeated. He panicked and was afraid that the two of them would confront him when they returned. Hence, he started to spread rumors in front of Yuan Shao, saying that Zhang He and Gao Lan wanted to surrender to Cao Cao and were unwilling to help. Yuan Shao was furious and naturally sent a messenger to summon the two of them back. Guotu secretly sent a messenger to find Zhang He and Gao Lan. After finding the two of them, he would say that Yuan Shao wanted to kill them and they would definitely escape. This was Guotu's plan. However, the messenger sent by Guotu was halfway there when he heard the cry of an eagle. Then, a black figure wearing a ghost mask descended from the sky. Shwa shwa shwa, two swords slashed out. The messenger and his two subordinates were all stabbed in the throat and killed instantly. The devil-masked person was Li Shui. After she killed the three people, she bent down and searched the messenger's body. She found a secret letter and put it away. Li Shui glanced at the notification from the spiritual world. Warning! You have attacked allies in Yuan Shao's camp. Your reputation will drop significantly, hidden. You have killed the last witness. Your reputation in Yuan Shao's camp has been restored, hidden. You have obtained a special item, Guotu's secret letter, fake. This item will definitely drop. Shoo, Li Shui whistled and the white eagle flew in front of her. She jumped onto the white eagle's back and quickly left the crime scene. Actually, the white eagle's flying speed was not as fast as Li Shui's running speed. Although the white eagle was a flying beast, it was agile. Therefore, when Li Shui was in a hurry, she didn't use the white eagle. This time, to kill the messenger of the treacherous official Guotu, he had to do it without leaving any traces. Li Shui used the white eagle to fly high and leave no clues behind. Of course, it was a time of chaos. Under normal circumstances, no one would come to solve the case. Li Shui did this just in case. Without Guotu's messenger causing trouble, Zhang He and Gao Lan successfully returned to the Yuan army camp. Zhang He and Guotu confronted each other, and Guotu insisted that Zhang He wanted to surrender to Cao Cao, which was why he did not help and caused the loss of soldiers. Although Zhang He was good at strategy, in terms of eloquence, he was not as good as Guotu's. The Yuan Shao believed Guotu and was about to punish the two when Zhu Shou entered the tent to stop him. Yuan Shao was embarrassed to see Zhu Shou and did not want Zhu Shou to mention the burning of the crow's nest. He pointed at Zhang He and Gao Lan and said, "On account of the supervisor, I'll let you off this time." The two of them were angry and left the tent. Zhu Shou was a man of steel. After seeing that Guotu had succeeded, he did not want to say anything and left. Zhang He and Gao Lan hastily expressed their gratitude to Zhu Shou. "Many thanks to Inspector General Darren for coming to intercede for the two of us despite your illness." Zhu Shou waved his hand and said, "I only found out about what happened after I heard from Second Young Master Li Shi. If you want to thank someone, you should thank Second Young Master." Zhang Yi sighed. "After losing the crow's nest, the morale of our army will definitely drop. I really don't know how we should fight this war." Zhu Shou persuaded, "The current situation is still okay." Luckily, Second Young Master attacked Shudu and Cao Cao lost his base. Now that the world is attacking Cao Cao, the situation will be even more dangerous than ours. Although we lost the crow's nest, we will still send grain from Jizhou. Generals, don't worry too much. Zhang He and Gao Lan thanked Zhu Shou and left. Just like what Zhu Shou said, fortunately Bai Xiaowen broke into Shudu and issued an imperial edict to the Yuan army, giving them hope of victory. If they did not have this shot in the arm, how would Zhang He and Gao Ji choose? Would they surrender to the Cao Cao? That would be hard to say. Chapter 1253. That night, the Cao army won a huge victory, and they finally won back some ground. The next day, at dawn, the Cao army was filled with rumors. The news of Yuan Shi breaking Shudu and dominating Yingchuan had started to spread throughout the army. Many of the Cao generals were from Yingchuan, and when they heard the news, they started to worry for their families. When Cao Cao heard the rumors, he was furious. "Who messed with the morale of my troops?" He ordered the various troops to investigate and capture 9 people under the rank of deputy general. All of a sudden, all of the generals were terrified and did not dare to speak about the Shudu matter. Cao Cao raised his tent and said to the generals, "Yuan Shi is just a lone army. Once I destroy Yuan Shao, I will be able to take him down easily. Now that the news of Shudu being broken, all of you must keep it a secret and not mention it. If any soldier asks, just say that there were thieves in Yingchuan, but they were destroyed by Governor Xiahou Yuan. There is no need to worry." Cao Cao's actions were to bully the normal soldiers. However, this move was effective, and the morale of the troops was stabilized. Hence, Cao Cao started to discuss a plan to break Yuan Shao. Sun Yu suggested, "Yuan Shao lost the grain from Wuchao, so the morale of the troops will be unstable. They want to move grain from Jizhou, so they need to send it from Yi City to the Jujube. Why don't we split up, one to take the Jujube and head straight for Yi City, the other to take Liang and cut off Yuan Shao's path back? When they split up, we will attack and destroy Yuan Shao." Yuan Shao was burned down and had lost many soldiers, so the morale of the troops was shaken. Yuan Shao did not have Cao Cao's decisiveness to stabilize the morale of the troops, so he could only ask Guotu and Feng Ji for advice. Just as they were discussing, a soldier came to report that the Cao army had split into 2, one to take Yi City and the other to Liang. Yuan Shao was shocked, and he quickly split out 2 groups, each with 50,000 men, to save Yi City and Liang. When the Cao army heard the movement of Yuan Shao's troops, the troops that had been prepared for a long time moved out and charged right at Yuan Shao's camp. Yuan Shao's troops lost their fighting spirit and fled in all directions. Yuan Shao himself was only wearing a simple shirt and a headscarf. He rode a horse to the north, with his son Yuan Shang following behind. The Cao army pursued relentlessly. Yuan Shao hastily crossed the Yellow River, throwing away all of his army's maps, chariots, gold, silk and other valuables. He only took the 800 defeated troops with him and fled northward. Amidst the chaos, the Cao army was unable to catch up, so they seized the Yuan army's chariots and weapons. As for the Yuan army, Cao Cao was ruthless and did not take any prisoners. More than 100,000 people were killed. Blood flowed freely, melting the ice of the Yellow River. Many of them drowned. After Cao Cao obtained a complete victory, he rewarded his soldiers and generals. Only his fourth son, Chao Xiong, was missing. When he asked, someone reported, fourth young master led 300 of his men to cross the river to pursue Yuan Shao. The left and right generals turned pale with fright. Lu Yi said, Zhu Gong's sons have all been captured by Yuan Shi, only Si Gongzi is still alive, we must not lose him. Our army should immediately cross the river and assist fourth young master. Cao Cao's face sunk. After thinking about it, he ordered Zhang Liao and Su Chu to cross the river to help Chao Xiong. He then said, our army has run out of provisions and we have lost our rear. We can't delay any longer. We must return to Sudu as soon as possible. How can we spoil our plans for one son? Yuan Shao fled north in a panic. Only when the killing sounds died down and the horses ran out of energy did he slow down. When he looked back, he only saw 800 defeated soldiers. The rest of the civil and military officials, as well as the soldiers and generals, were nowhere to be seen. Only the third prince, Yuan Shang, and his strategist, Feng Ji, were following him. Yuan Shao discussed with Feng Ji and decided that they could only rush back to Lian. Jiang Yitsu was there, so they could reorganize their troops and gather the defeated soldiers. Li Shi painted her face black and followed the defeated soldiers with her head lowered. There was also a layer of chameleon blood potion on her body, which concealed her original commander-level psionic aura. When spiritual world people and awakened ones sensed it, they could only see it as a normal template. However, this layer of status would disappear after attacking, so it could not be used as a tool to hide one's identity. Apart from that, Li Shi also carried an A-grade silver item, Pearl of Deception. This was an item she obtained from the Drow elf matriarch Cynthia's treasure chest. It could be disguised as someone else, but it was hard to guarantee that the natives of the three kingdoms would not see through it. Therefore, when Bai Xiaowen gave orders, he specifically told Li Shi not to make a move until the last moment. Even if she had the Pearl of Deception, it was not reliable. Calculating the distance, I'm afraid that Yuan Shao will soon meet up with the loyal general. Chao Xiong. Oh no, those guys from the Divine Court, why haven't they come yet? Is my luck so bad that I have to do it myself? Li Shi's fingers held the Pearl of Deception. However, the sound of the drum that followed shook Li Shi's spirit. At some point, a group of elite cavalry had circled to the front of Yuan Shao's defeated army and rushed to kill. In the eyes of the other natives, the young general in the lead was Cao Cao's fourth son, Chao Xiong. Chapter 1254. Boom! A bolt of lightning flashed, and the spear pierced through Yuan Shao's chest, taking away his last bit of life. Yuan Shao knelt on the ground, coughing up black clots of blood. I regret not listening to Tianfeng and Zhu Shou. After the last line, Yuan Shao fell. The commander-in-chief, the governor of Ji province, who was in charge of the affairs of Ji, Qing, Yu, and other provinces, Yuan Shao, the first duke of the late Han dynasty, was dead. Chao Xiong, Richard, got off his horse and cut off Yuan Shao's head. He was in a good mood and said with a smile, the merit of killing Yuan Shao is enough to make me the first successor, right? Alberta, the head of the intelligence agency beside him, smiled and said, congratulations. It should be noted that the conversation between the two was in English, but it would be automatically translated into the ancient Huaxia and Three Kingdoms era language. The rules of the spirit realm would try to help the awakened so that they would not be suspected by the people of the spirit realm because of language, special effects, and so on. Of course, if the natives of the spirit realm really saw through it, the rules of the spirit realm would not forcefully change their minds. What should we do with Yuan Shang? Richard asked. Alberta said, wait, there's one more. His lips moved, and he told Richard in a secret way. Richard narrowed his eyes and suddenly threw the lightning spear at a corner of the colonel. Then, as if he was one with the spear, he instantly crossed a distance of hundreds of meters. On the other side of the call, a group of defeated soldiers was running away, but Richard immediately locked onto one of them and threw the spear with all his strength. Unexpectedly, the seemingly ordinary soldier suddenly jumped up and ran dozens of steps into the air, and then ran with the wind at an incredible speed. Richard's lightning spear had used up all the lightning energy, and it was not powerful enough. It only killed an unlucky soldier, but it could not catch up with the figure. "Hey, if you run again, I'll let Yuan Shan go," Richard shouted loudly. The figure ran even faster. Richard snorted as he looked at the extremely fast and slender figure. His eyes revealed a trace of seriousness. Alberta came to his side and said, "Is it the subordinate of that Yuan Shi?" Richard nodded and said, "I think so. This person is very strong." "I'm afraid this speed is the limit of an awakened one," Alberta said. "Which powerful force does he belong to?" "I'm not sure." Richard frowned. "However, I don't intend to capture Yuan Shan alive. I want to give him a chance to escape. Do you understand my intentions? You want to cause trouble for Yuan Shi. But why did you tell this subordinate of Yuan Shi that you're going to let Yuan Shan go?" "She will definitely try to assassinate Yuan Shan," Alberta said. Richard shook his head and said, "I want her to do it. As long as she doesn't do it well, the spies we've placed in Yuan Shao's camp will take action and cause her reputation to skyrocket. At that time, even if Yuan Shi can sacrifice the pawn to protect the general, they will lose a powerful helper for no reason." "All right, what the class monitor said makes sense." Alberta shrugged and said, "It's time to test our acting skills again." "Don't worry, we are professionals when it comes to acting." Suzhou, Xinjiang. Bai Xiaowen's 20,000-man army had passed through Yangdi and Chang'e cities consecutively, but they were blocked by the defending generals. These two generals were just ordinary leaders. How could they resist the elites of the Yuzhou army and the winged cavalry? It was purely a free gift. It was just delaying Bai Xiaowen for some time. After entering Suzhou, Xinjiang was also considered a strong city. Although it was much weaker than Sudu, Bai Xiaowen didn't want to waste time. He originally wanted to go around the city, but he didn't expect that the defending general of Xinjiang, Yan Hao, wouldn't let him go and led the defending army to block him. With the previous experience, when two armies faced each other, they had to shout a few words. "Yan Hao, the Emperor's imperial carriage is here. How dare you block it?" Bai Xiaowen's line was very smooth. Yan Hao said loudly, "Bandits kidnapped the Emperor's officials. Their crimes are unforgivable. If I let you go, who will let me go?" Bai Xiaowen patted his wrath claw and took 2 steps forward. "Since you all want to stop me, then let's fight." As he spoke, the flying wolf charged forward. When Yan Hao saw the wrath claw's divine steed, he felt a little guilty. Furthermore, Bai Xiaowen had killed Zhang Jiao. With his reputation, he didn't dare to go against him. He immediately shouted, "You're just a kid. You're not worthy of me. Don't talk nonsense. Men, take down this bandit." Bai Xiaowen received a notification. Enemy General Yan Hao refuses to fight. Yan Hao's troops morale -3. Bai Xiaowen squinted his eyes and smiled. Fighting generals was a special feature of the 3 kingdoms. The side that initiated the battle would not have a change in morale. If the opponent agreed, there would be no change in morale either. If the opponent rejected the battle, the morale would drop by a maximum of 5 points. If the general lost, the morale would drop even more. The winning side's morale +10, while the losing side's morale -10. Morale sounded very vague, but in reality, it referred to the spirit of an army. An army with high morale would increase its hit rate, movement speed, and other important combat indicators according to the morale value. When morale reached a certain level, it would even form an army buff effect. On the other hand, low morale would affect the combat ability of the soldiers. When morale fell to a certain level, it would also trigger a negative effect. If morale was too low, it would be easy for the army to collapse. There were many factors that affected morale. Other than the commanding ability of the general and the quality of the soldiers, fighting generals, marching, rations, and so on were all important factors. Of course, the most important factor was the outcome of the battle. If they won a battle, as long as it wasn't a Pyrrhic victory, it would increase morale. Casualties would lower morale. If they suffered a crushing defeat, it would greatly reduce morale. Of course, the degree of reduction was also related to the leadership ability of the general. Some generals were defeated but didn't panic. They were defeated in a good way. They kept on fighting despite repeated defeats. Some of the information regarding morale was accumulated by Bai Xiaowen through the previous battles. The rest was the answer he obtained from the spiritual realm's laws. Seeing that Yan Hao didn't dare to fight, Bai Xiaowen smiled and immediately gave the order to beat the drums. The winged cavalry charged under the lead of the Death Knights. The 20,000 Yuzhou soldiers followed behind to pick up the scraps. This kind of small-scale or even medium-scale battle was most suitable for Bai Xiaowen to display his deterrence. The moment the two sides were about to clash, Bai Xiaowen activated his deterrence, turning the 3,000 soldiers led by Yan Hao into clay statues. After Bai Xiaowen killed Yan Hao, the Yuzhou soldiers followed the winged cavalry and charged for a while. When the mental force field was withdrawn, the formation of the Xinjiang soldiers was completely messed up and they were fleeing in all directions. Bai Xiaowen didn't want to waste time chasing them down. He just wanted to defeat them. He ordered the Yuzhou army to regroup and then used Mengdashu's speed as a crucial asset in war to rush north. If Bai Xiaowen wanted to take over the city, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. However, he didn't do so. Taking over Xinjiang was meaningless to the Yuzhou soldiers who were eager to return home. It was also good that they could return to their own territory earlier. Chapter 1255. In the Emperor's carriage, Lu Xie stood on the carriage and watched the battle. He said to Fu Wan, "What do you think of this battle?" Fu Wan was silent for a moment before saying, "I'm not looking at this battle, but the results of today's battle. In 10 hours, Yuan Jingbei led the army to escort your Majesty's carriage and the families of the officials. He fought for 300 li, broke through 3 cities and 6 strongholds, and killed 15 generals. Even Sun Wu of ancient times could not match up to such a strategy. Is that so? But I saw that he only met 1 or 2,000 enemy soldiers in each battle. At most, there were 3,000 in this battle. 20,000 against a few thousand, he could easily win." Lu Xie said. Fu Wan thought hard for a moment before saying, "Your Majesty, please forgive me for my stupidity. In my opinion, Traitor Chao's army in Yu Province and Si Province is not small. If the enemy could gather together and lead tens of thousands of soldiers to attack, General Yuan would not be able to stop them no matter how strong he is. However, this is where General Yuan's strength lies." Lu Xie asked curiously, "How is he strong?" Fu Wan said, "Yu Province and Si Province are Traitor Chao's territories. General Yuan's Yuzhou army is surrounded by enemies and could easily fall into the enemy's encirclement. However, General Yuan has an inconceivable insight. He always avoids the dense enemy forces and uses the speed of the army to pass through, not giving the enemy a chance to surround him. He moves between swords and sabers without a single injury. This makes me gasp in amazement." Lu Xie nodded and said, "If not for this genius, he would not have been able to break through Shudu. In your Majesty's opinion, can this person be used?" Fu Wan sighed and said in his heart, "You're thinking too much." He said, "Your Majesty, before we reach Yi City, nothing is certain." Lu Xie was silent for a moment. He looked left and right and sighed, "If Yuan Shi is truly loyal to the country, he will be able to restore Han Dynasty. If he is like Cao Cao and has ambitions, I will have to think of other ways. I do not want to be the ruler of a fallen country." Fu Wan hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, please do not be too impatient. Moving the capital to Yi City, regardless of the future, is better than staying in Shudu without any light. Father and son of the Yuan family, observe their words and actions first. After distinguishing between the traitors and the loyalists, we can make further plans." The Yuzhou army continued to march. Qiao Rui and Bai Xiaowen walked side by side. Suddenly, she said with some emotion, "The captain's spiritual perception range seems to be much larger than before." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, it's all the inner vision techniques taught by Guxian. I've already told you the method, have you learned it? Qiao Rui shook his head and said, I still can't figure it out. It seems that this is similar to the blacksmithing sub-profession. Both of them need to be taught by people from the spirit world to be effective. Bai Xiaowen pondered for a while before saying, when we return to Yuzhou province, I'll try to ask Guxian to impart the internal vision method to you. Qiao Rui quickly shook his head. No. You've spent so much effort on Guxian, so you must have a follow-up plan. It doesn't matter whether I learn it or not. Don't let Guxian have a grudge against you and become estranged from the friend you've worked so hard to establish. Bai Xiaowen didn't dare to make any guarantees. After all, Hua Xia's Taoist sects seemed to pay a lot of attention to immoral fate. His relationship with Guxian wasn't so good that they could wear the same pants. Qiao Rui said, up ahead is Xi province. Where do you plan to go? Bai Xiaowen said, all the way north. Try not to take any detours and cross the Yellow River at Mengjin. Fortunately, the weather is cold and the Yellow River is frozen, so there's no need to gather ships. Once we reach Bingzhou, we won't have to be in such a hurry. Bingzhou was the territory of the Yuan family. The provincial governor, Gao Gan, was Yuan Shao's nephew. In the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Gao Gan's talent aside, his loyalty to the Yuan family was obvious to all. Out of the 7 times Meng Dishu had used it, he had already used 3 of them. All of them were used on the speed as a crucial asset in war plan. Luckily, the emperor's carriage and the carriages of the officials were also seen as allies and were buffed by Meng Dishu's plan. Otherwise, Bai Xiaowen's travel speed would have been twice as slow as it was now. Leading such a large and bloated mixed army to avoid the encirclement and interception of the defenders in various places in a situation where they were surrounded by enemies, it was easy to say, but how difficult was it in practice? Apart from Uncle Lu, only Bai Xiaowen knew. Apart from the mental sensing ability and the ability to search the terrain, the speed buff and stamina reduction buff provided by the speed as a crucial asset in war plan were also extremely important. After passing Xinjiang, the number of encounters with the Chao army along the way became much less frequent. Bai Xiaowen frowned and closed his eyes. He used his mental energy to scan the back of the Wrath Claw over and over again. He changed the wide-range sensing method of the cauldron lid and changed it to an antenna method of scanning with his mental energy. The radius expanded to more than 5 kilometers, but he still couldn't find any traces of the Chao army. Qiao Rui looked at Bai Xiaowen's pale face and the faint beads of sweat on his forehead with some heartache. This isn't normal, this isn't normal. After a long while, Bai Xiaowen opened his eyes and said, unfortunately, your spirit of the falcon is still on cooldown. There are many godly archers in the 3 kingdoms, and I don't dare to use my spirit of the white falcon to scout the enemy. Qiao Rui said, if you can't scout the enemy, is it because they are afraid of you, so they don't dare to send troops to stop you? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, our speed is very fast. Our marching speed can be considered very fast. The speed at which Chao's defeated troops spread the news of their defeat should not be as fast as ours. Therefore, the assumption that the enemy north of Xinjiang is afraid of me is not true. Yan Hao's words just now caught my attention. He said, if I let you go, who will let me go? From this, I can infer that the Chao army in Yuzhou and Xizhou must have received strict orders to block our escape route to the north at all costs. Qiao Rui nodded and said, no wonder Yan Hao and the other generals only have 1 or 2 or 3,000 soldiers under their command, yet they still dare to stop us. Bai Xiaowen sighed and said, let me think, who is in charge of Xizhou at this time? Li Fu? Ding Chong? No, the timing is wrong. The current commandant of Xili should be Zhong Yao. I've heard of this person. He is very talented and is a famous calligrapher, Qiao Rui said. It's not just calligraphy. This person is very good. Bai Xiaowen sighed. In terms of intelligence, Zhong Yao is probably not much worse than Sun Yu. He can be said to be Cao Cao's other arm. He guarded Guanzhong for many years and allowed Cao Cao to avoid the harassment of Ma Tang and Han Sui from the northwest. He was able to focus on fighting against Yuan Shao, Lu Bu, and the other forces. His contributions are huge. As he said that, Bai Xiaowen was a bit envious. Cao Cao, this bastard, holds the emperor and orders his vassals. The benefits he receives are too great. Talents that are hard to find in other forces all appear in his place. For example, this Zhong Yao can lead troops to war and also govern the provinces. Under his rule, the Guanzhong area went from being dilapidated to having a full population. It's hard to come by. Hey, you should think about how Zhong Yao will deal with us first, Qiao Rui said. Chapter 1256. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, I can already guess a thing or two, but in order to brainstorm, I'll still ask Sun Yu and the others. After all, they are my first group of strategists. At that moment, Bai Xiaowen sent the military academy to invite Sun Yu, Lu Gui, Dong Zhao, and Sima Yi from the carriages of the officials. He asked, It has been a day since our army left Shudu and went north. Previously, there were enemy troops blocking us, but after passing through the Xinjiang border, we did not encounter any enemy troops for 100 miles. The four of you are all soldiers with military strategies and hidden troops. What do you think? The four of them were speechless. It seemed that they had not changed their identities. This was normal. Lu Gui and the other two were talents of Shudu that Sun Yu had brought over according to the agreement. Among them, Lu Gui was considered a hermit. Sima Yi had yet to become an official. Only Dong Zhao had an official position. They were probably stunned deep in their hearts when they were chosen by Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen actually wanted to choose better talents, but at that moment, the virtuous officials and strategists of Shudu had basically been taken away by Cao Cao. He could only settle for the next best thing. Lu Gui and Dong Zhao were ordinary scholar-type leaders. They were the kind of talents who could handle government affairs and govern counties, but were not suitable for combat. As for Sima Yi, Bai Xiaowen almost couldn't believe it after seeing it with his insight. He thought that he had seen wrongly. At that moment, Sima Yi was only a level 7 leader. That's right, he was not a lord. He was not even a rare leader. However, he was not a pure scholar-type leader. Instead, he was a scholarly general who could go to the battlefield with both civil and military skills. After thinking about it, Bai Xiaowen could only conclude that it was not the time for Sima Yi to show off his abilities. Just like Cao Zhang, he had not experienced the training of a series of events in the spirit world and had yet to grow. The setting of the spirit world's rules was actually very scientific. If one did not care about the characters' encounters and their ability values were all fixed, it was very likely that there would be opportunistic situations. After all, this was a historical dimension. Many awakened had a certain degree of prophetic advantage. Think about it. If an awakened cut in during the early stages of the Three Kingdoms War and went to Nanyang to kill the teenage Zhuge Liang, would he be able to obtain a lord's treasure chest, a huge amount of psionic points, and a series of increases in reputation? This obviously did not conform to common sense. However, the young man in front of him, Sima Yi, was also a potential stock that Bai Xiaowen valued. Although he hadn't gone through any training and his horizons were much worse than when he was at his peak, his foundation was still there. Furthermore, he was already an adult, so there was no problem with his intelligence. Bai Xiaowen was actually mentally prepared for their silence. He directly called out, "What do you think, Mr. Sun?" Sun Yu bowed and said, "This one has already left my ribbon seal in Sudu. From now on, I am no longer a minister. Gongzi, you don't have to call me Lord Ling anymore. In addition, please forgive me for not being able to comment on eunuch Chao's affairs. With young master's talent, you should be able to see a thing or two. Your esteemed lord's words are incorrect. Your lord was an official of the Han dynasty. The title of Minister of Shangshu was also conferred by the imperial court. It was not a position that Cao Cao set up privately. After we move the capital to Yi City, I will still recommend to His Majesty to keep you in your original position." After pausing for a moment, Bai Xiaowen said, "Since your husband is unwilling to offer advice on Cao Cao's affairs, then I won't force you. Thank you, young master, for your understanding. Sun Yu's face didn't have any expression of gratitude. He was just calm, like there was nothing to worry about. Bai Xiaowen then asked Lu Gui, I have long heard that Mr. Lu is an elder and has vast knowledge. Today's matter will definitely have an explanation. Lu Gui shook his head. I am old and muddle-headed. I don't know why young master wants me to leave my hometown. As for the matter in front of me, I also don't understand. Sima Yi had been standing respectfully at the side. Seeing that the two of them had already declined, he opened his mouth and said, Zhongde is just a nameless person. To be asked by young master, I am deeply grateful. I only hate myself for being young and ignorant and not being able to help young master. In the end, Bai Xiaowen looked at Dong Zhao. Although Dong Zhao's expression didn't change, from his breathing and heartbeat, Bai Xiaowen could feel a bit of nervousness. The reason was simple. Dong Zhao had originally joined the army under Yuan Shao and had made some contributions. Like Sun Yu, he thought that Yuan Shao wasn't a wise master and thus abandoned him. Later on, when Cao Cao welcomed the emperor, he joined Cao Cao's camp. Bai Xiaowen knew this like the back of his hand. He smiled. Minister Dong used to be under my father's camp. Now that you have returned to your old master, you should be happy. Dong Zhao could only bow and say, my sinful body is extremely fearful. Bai Xiaowen smiled. My father is thirsty for talents and will not be constrained by such a small matter. Moreover, the four of you will be assisting me from now on, not my father. There is no need to worry. This is the case for Lord Sun, and it is also the case for you. Dong Zhao let out a sigh of relief. This was the first time that Lu Gui and the other two had heard of Bai Xiaowen's great ambition to be independent. They were all shocked. However, Bai Xiaowen had already proven his ability. The three of them could accept this. Bai Xiaowen said again, Minister Dong, what do you think about the abnormal actions of the Sea Province garrison? Dong Zhao said, Young master, you are testing me. I heard that the Sea Province's chief political officer is called Zhong Yao. He comes from the Yingchuan aristocratic family and has both literary and military experience. He must have seen the sharpness of young master's army and how the various city garrisons' obstructions are like cobwebs of dust that can be easily brushed away without any effect. Therefore, he concentrated his forces and intercepted young master's only path back to the north. Bai Xiaowen smiled. Minister Dong's words are reasonable. How should we deal with this? Dong Zhao said, looking at young master's marching route, he should be crossing the river at Mengjin. Thinking about it, the Sea Province army that Zhong Yao gathered should also be setting up an ambush around Mengjin. The remaining provinces and cities should be empty. Young master only needs to do the opposite and not rush to cross the river. Instead, he needs to go to Xingyang, Qinggao, and threaten Luoyang. Then, the 5 provinces of Sea Province will be like young master's back garden. Bai Xiaowen was a little surprised. Dong Zhao's words had the essence of guerrilla warfare behind the enemy's back. It could be seen that there were similarities between ancient and modern military wisdom. Sun Yu frowned and said, if that's the case, the people of Sea Province will suffer another calamity. Moreover, delaying in Sea Province will only harm the overall situation. Originally, Sun Yu didn't want to say anything. However, when it concerned the people of Sea Province, he couldn't hold back. Dong Zhao said, the whole world is attacking Chao. Delaying it is actually beneficial for young master. When Chao Gong retreats back to Shudu, the commander-in-chief will definitely advance to occupy Guandu and open the door to Hunan. At that time, Chao Gong will be too busy to take care of young master. Sun Yu shook his head and didn't say anything. Bai Xiaowen sighed. Dong Zhao was still inferior to Sun Yu. Since Cao Cao dared to order the various garrisons in Yu Province and Sea Province to block his escape route to the north, it proved that the situation in Guandu had changed greatly. At the very least, Cao Cao held a certain amount of initiative. However, the army was advancing and the news hadn't reached them yet. Sun Yu must have seen some clues from Cao Cao's order. That was why he said that delaying it was detrimental to the overall situation. If they followed Dong Zhao's plan and delayed in Sea Province, they would soon encounter Cao Cao's main force. Bai Xiaowen said, "I've considered both of your opinions." Zhong Yao set up an ambush at Mengjin. The Sea Province army that he gathered is at most tens of thousands. Moreover, most of them are old and weak city defenders. What do I have to fear? Knowing that there are tigers in the mountain, I still want to go there. I want to break through Mengjin and capture Zhong Yao alive. Chapter 1257. The Yuzhou army led by Bai Xiaowen had marched for an entire day, fought for several hundred li, defeated the enemy 9 times, and killed 15 enemy generals. Although Bai Xiaowen and the other awakened still had the strength to continue fighting, the Yuzhou army was mostly exhausted, especially the Son of Heaven's imperial carriage and the accompanying officials. Logically speaking, they needed to rest and reorganize after nightfall and then set out again at daybreak. However, Bai Xiaowen had ordered that the army could only rest for 2 hours. Bai Xiaowen had given this 2 hours of rest after careful consideration. First, although the Yuzhou army had fought 9 battles, they had only faced a weak army of 1 or 2,000 men. They had won crushing victories, and the intensity of the battles had been very low. Second, the Yuzhou army's march had been carried out under Meng De Xian's speed as a crucial asset in war strategy, which had reduced their stamina consumption by 50%. Moreover, in consideration of the speed of the Son of Heaven's imperial carriage and the officials' carriages, the soldiers did not march very quickly and consumed very little stamina. Coupled with the Yuzhou army's own stamina recovery, it could be said that their stamina consumption was not very high. The reason they felt so tired was because they were mentally exhausted and needed sleep. However, the Yuzhou army had won 9 victories in a row and suffered very few casualties. Their morale was constantly on the rise, and even the exhaustion of marching did not lower their morale much. In these circumstances, Bai Xiaowen dared to issue the strict order of only 2 hours of rest, and he did not need to worry about the soldiers' mutiny and scatter. As for the Son of Heaven and the officials, they were probably tired of sitting in the carriages. Bai Xiaowen naturally did not care. 2 hours later, Bai Xiaowen ordered the entire army to light torches and continue on their journey through the night. The army that had only slept for 2 hours was still somewhat sleepy at first, but after walking for a while, they became energetic once more. As for whether or not they would be ambushed by the enemy at night, Bai Xiaowen said that with his large-scale psychic perception and antennae, there was no need to worry. After walking for most of the night, at dawn, the Yuzhou army finally arrived at the ferry to the north of Mengjin. They saw the disorderly ranks of the Suzhou army busy digging ditches and setting up camp overnight. In the darkness of the night, they could only rely on the light from the braziers and torches in the temporary camp opposite them. For a moment, they could not see clearly how many people there were. Dong Zhao said with some admiration, "Young master's speed in marching the army caused the Suzhou army to not have time to set up camp. If they waited until noon tomorrow, when the enemy had finished building their camp, the difficulty of attacking would at least double. If we take this opportunity to attack, the Suzhou army will be defeated in a single blow." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. He first called Cecilia over and gave her a few instructions. The latter obeyed his orders and left. Bai Xiaowen then ordered the Yuzhou army to split into 4 groups and attack the temporary camp of the Suzhou army. With the sound of a gong, the disorganized Suzhou army scattered in all directions without any fighting spirit. The Yuzhou army seized the opportunity and seized the ferry. Bai Xiaowen probed the ice layer of the Yellow River. The layer of ice was not thick, but it was enough to carry an army across the river. Bai Xiaowen rode the Wrath Claw at the very front. The 20,000 soldiers escorted the emperor's imperial carriage and the carriages of the officials, forming a long line with 10 people side by side. This ferry was the narrowest part of the Yellow River and the riverbed was gentle. It was the most suitable place for an army to cross. However, just as Bai Xiaowen was about to lead the Yuzhou army to the opposite bank, he heard the sound of a clapper. On the opposite bank, a black mass of soldiers spread out in a line and rained down arrows. From time to time, Yuzhou soldiers would scream as they were struck by arrows. On the opposite bank, where the torches were lit, a fully armored general swaggered and jeered, "Little Yuan boy, you've been tricked. Raise your shields." Bai Xiaowen's voice was calm and spread out with the support of his psychic energy. He had long since prepared for this and had set up a long line. At the very front were sword and shield wielders. They stood at the very front with their shields raised to block the rain of arrows. Bai Xiaowen used insight on this general. This was a third-rate general who could be considered a qualified leader. His name was Yan Ming. Zhong Yao is indeed smart. He should have started gathering the Suzhou army after receiving Cao Cao's order to set up an ambush on the north bank of the Yellow River. His goal was not to stop me from crossing the Yellow River but to ambush me halfway. As for the soldiers on the south bank, it was just a diversion. Fortunately, all of this was within the range of Bai Xiaowen's psychic energy. Bai Xiaowen rode the Wrath Claw and charged at the front, being the first to step onto the dry riverbed on the opposite bank. In the cold cave, the silt on the exposed riverbed was also frozen hard. Bai Xiaowen immediately unleashed a large-scale deterrence and gave the order for the Yuzhou army to charge. The moment the order was given, the Yuzhou army was like an awakened snake, speeding up toward the north bank. However, at this moment, something strange happened. In the middle section of the Yellow River, a deafening explosion suddenly rang out on the frozen river surface. The sound of this explosion was even stronger than the high-explosive bombs of modern warfare. Moreover, it was accompanied by soaring flames. Bai Xiaowen's insight received information that this was a special tool that the Suzhou army had temporarily used, the Thunderfire Array. It was actually black gunpowder. In terms of advanced technology, black gunpowder was far inferior to modern explosives. However, this Thunderfire Array was a fusion of the Taoist techniques of the Three Kingdoms, making it even stronger and fiercer. Of course, this was only the official explanation. The real reason was that the power of the items in the spirit realm had nothing to do with the advanced craftsmanship. It was only related to the strength of the psionic particles contained. The strength of the psionic particles contained made wooden swords and bone spears much stronger than steel weapons. And the strength of the psionic particles was directly related to the difficulty of the plane. Bai Xiaowen frowned. Although the Thunderfire Array was not weak, it only affected an area of 10 meters. 6 explosions in total was not a serious blow to the entire Yuzhou army. Moreover, the Yellow River was too cold for the Thunderfire Array to be effective. Many of the soldiers were injured but not killed. Only a few unlucky soldiers at the center of the explosion were blasted to death. In total, only several dozen people were killed. However, Zhong Yao had not laid down the Thunderfire Array to use it to destroy the Yuzhou army. Instead, he wanted to blow up the ice of the Yellow River. The ice was not thick to begin with, only enough to support the weight of a person crossing the river. Now that it had been blasted apart by the Thunderfire Array, large chunks of ice began to shatter, ultimately creating a region of ice several hundred meters in diameter. More than 1,000 Yuzhou soldiers, along with the carriages of nearly 10 imperial court officials, plunged into the icy river. The cracks in the ice were still widening. The Yuzhou army had been cut in two, like a snake that had been cut in two, its head and tail unable to care for each other. Calm down. Bai Xiaowen's deterrence psychic force field maintained the output of psychic energy, controlling the enemy so that the archers would not continue to harass them and cause even greater panic. At the same time, he loudly said, "Protect the Son of Heaven's imperial carriage. Jiao Tan, Zhang Nan, lead your men to the left and right side of the ice cave, and go ashore to provide support." Jiao Tan and Zhang Nan hurriedly replied. Suddenly, the dull sound of a drum could be heard. Along with the sound of the drum, there seemed to be a glaring white light, like lightning, that flashed and disappeared. Bai Xiaowen groaned as his psychic force field was forced to end prematurely. The laws of the spirit realm notified him, General Chunyu of the Zhongyao army has sounded the flute drum. You have been shaken by the flute drum. Deterrence's special effect, psychic force field interruption. Bai Xiaowen's expression finally paled. Even though psychic energy had revealed that there was an enemy ambush on the northern shore, Bai Xiaowen had still ordered the Yuzhou army to force their way across the river. One of the major factors he was relying on was his deterrence. In the Three Kingdoms, deterrence was a godly skill on a battlefield of medium scale and below. It could turn enemies in a large area into live targets and slaughter them for at least a minute. Although this 1-minute battle was not very eye-catching in the entire battle, and if the soldiers under his command were to attack, they would only be able to kill 1,000 or 800 enemies at most. However, the main effect of deterrence was to disrupt the enemy's formation. Once the enemy's formation was disrupted, they would not be far from being defeated. And when faced with a surprise attack, deterrence could also serve as a deterrent to the enemy and give the allies space to regroup. It was definitely not an exaggeration to call it a godly skill. However, Bai Xiaowen's psychic force field, which had been tested time and time again, had actually been broken by the flute drum. I still underestimated the native armies of the Three Kingdoms. Bai Xiaowen reflected on himself. Zhong Yao must have understood Bai Xiaowen's combat characteristics and knew that he had a very powerful Dao technique that could control him for a long period of time. Otherwise, he would not have prepared a tool like the flute drum in advance. In the past, the native armies probably did not know Bai Xiaowen's background, which was why he had been able to succeed time and time again. However, in the future, it would not be so easy to rely on psychic force field to take advantage of him. The only good news was that Bai Xiaowen's deterrence did not have a long cooldown, only a few minutes. Even though the flute drum had interrupted his continuous psychic force field output, it had still preserved his psychic energy. Once the cooldown of deterrence was over, it could be used again. However, he did not know how rare the flute drum was. If it could be used continuously, it would be very troublesome. Soon, Zhong Yao's troops on the north bank of the Yellow River recovered from their stunned state and once again drew their bows and arrows to harass the Yuzhou troops and create even more chaos. In the dark night, there were ice caves and arrow showers. It would be very easy for the Yuzhou troops to retreat to the south bank. In this way, the casualties of the soldiers were secondary. The delay was truly fatal. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen had another plan in mind. On the north bank of the Yellow River, several miles away, at another narrow riverbed, a group of cavalry successfully reached the shore. It was the winged cavalry led by Cecilia. When the Yuzhou troops crossed the river, it seemed that they had been ambushed by Zhong Yao's troops and were in a sorry state. However, wasn't this also a pretense? The winged cavalry led by Cecilia had successfully reached the shore. This was the first ray of hope. Bai Xiaowen controlled it from afar and set up an airdrop. The Death Knight and 3 Terror Knights appeared in front of the winged cavalry. The army charged. Blood-red arrows bloomed on the ground on the north bank of the Yellow River. The archers commanded by Director Chengyu and Yanming were pierced through from the side by the winged cavalry who had super armor throughout the entire process. These archers were the weak soldiers of the various cities in Suzhou that were temporarily put together. They could shoot arrows when the wind was favorable, but in a real hand-to-hand battle, once there were casualties, they would collapse at the first touch. Especially when their opponents were the winged cavalry who had experienced many battles. The pressure on the front immediately decreased. Anxious Zhang Nan hurriedly led his troops around the ice caves and crossed the Yellow River. After all, the winged cavalry's first charge was the strongest. After the super armor state disappeared, the impact would definitely be much weaker. Heavy shield soldiers. Heavy shield soldiers, go forward and block the cavalry. Protect the archers. General Yanming, who was still proud of himself and said that Bai Xiaowen had fallen into a trap, hurriedly shouted. The heavy shield soldiers in black armor stepped out and formed a shield wall. Without the super armor, the winged cavalry would definitely pay a huge price if they wanted to break through this shield wall. However, there was no need for that. Because Bai Xiaowen had already crossed the river and reached the shore. With the help of the enemy's arrow rain, Bai Xiaowen suffered hundreds of points of damage. His strength had quietly risen to 90 points. He targeted the Death Knight again and activated Symbiosis. Borrowing the strength of the Death Knight, his strength rose to 127 points. Then, Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath and activated the huge serpent python. The surging flames covered an area of hundreds of meters, enveloping the heavy shield soldiers, a large number of archers, and General Yan Ming. If Bai Xiaowen's 100 points of spirit brought about terrifying continuous burning magic damage, then what did 127 points of strength represent? What a terrifying impact! Yan Ming was the first to be charged. His burly body was sent flying like a small stone. The man and horse were separated in mid-air. Then, the warhorse was turned into charcoal before it could even let out a sorrowful cry. Yan Ming himself flew dozens of meters and turned into a rolling gourd. It was a charred gourd that was heavily burned and had its attributes halved. Even the leader-level generals were like this, let alone the heavy shield soldiers and archers. Bai Xiaowen's serpent python cleared an area of hundreds of meters. Everywhere it went, it was a mess. This spectacular scene was almost no inferior to Zhang Jiao's yellow sky lightning pool. Of course, in terms of power, there was still a difference. Brother Jiao relied on his high spirit and the additional lightning damage buff to form the scene of a lightning pool melting the enemy. The soldiers who were hit by it had no hope of surviving. Bai Xiaowen, on the other hand, used the power of the pain potential and the power of the Death Knight to form a terrifying impact to send the enemy flying, creating the illusion of clearing the area. In fact, most of the soldiers who were hit were still at low HP and did not die. They would only be heavily burned and have their attributes halved. Bai Xiaowen then added a shot and finished off the seriously injured Yan Ming. The front of the Sizhou army, which was not considered elite and was temporarily put together, was completely defeated by the Wing cavalry's charge and Bai Xiaowen's huge serpent python. As soon as Yan Ming died, they shouted and fled in all directions. Rumble, the war drum sounded. The middle army of the Sizhou army pressed over. Led by General Chunyu, they tried to drive the 800 Wing cavalry and the vanguard of the Yuzhou army back to the Yellow River. However, Qiao Rui's soul rhythm sounded leisurely. Just now, the soldiers under Qiao Rui's command rescued the soldiers and officials who had fallen into the water. After confirming that the Emperor's imperial carriage was fine, they rushed over to help. Buzz! The serpent drum sounded again. However, this time, it only made Qiao Rui pause for a second. She then continued playing the soul rhythm. The attributes of the middle army of the Sizhou army led by General Chunyu decreased rapidly. However, they waited at ease and had the advantage of numbers. They still suppressed Bai Xiaowen's vanguard troops to the riverbank. Bai Xiaowen did not have a better idea. Now was the time to compete with the combat power of the army. He did not try to control General Chunyu with the bewitching spell talisman. Instead, he controlled the rare elite generals under General Chunyu. It could be said that he controlled one of them accurately. Although the controlled generals would be hacked to death by the people around them as soon as they betrayed him, the panic and impact on morale were real. Chapter 1258. The improvement brought by the awakening technique was huge. In just a few dozen seconds, Bai Xiaowen could throw out a bewitching talisman. Of course, the requirement for mental strength was also very terrifying. This was because every bewitching charm had to be continuously infused with mental strength in order to control a rare elite-level small boss. Ever since Bai Xiaowen equipped the purple ribbon cloud brocade robe, his mental energy recovery speed doubled and he basically did not lack mana. However, after the talisman became an awakening technique, he started to feel a lack of mana. He even used the blood essence stone to replenish his mana. Due to the heavy mental energy consumption, the effects were also very obvious. This meant that every few seconds, Bai Xiaowen could make an enemy elite leader betray him. The command system of the Sizhou army slowly became chaotic. The orders given by the generals needed the elite leaders to lead the normal soldiers to carry it out. With the leaders dead, the low-level soldiers did not know what to do. Along with the elite wing cavalry and Qiao Rui's soul rhythm, Bai Xiaowen's troops were able to block the attacks of the Sizhou army. The Yuzhou army that followed, led by Jiao Tan and Zhang Nan, went ashore and pushed back the battle line step by step. After fighting until dawn, the Suzhou army had already been pushed back a few miles. The Yuzhou army, including the emperor's carriage, all successfully went ashore. At dawn, Qiao Rui released the spirit of the falcon that had finished its cooldown and flew towards the southeast to scout. At this point, Qiao Rui's expression suddenly changed. The spirit of the falcon was shot down. I didn't have time to see it clearly. I only have a rough location. It's about 100 miles away from Mengjin. This means that the main force of the Qiao army is already on the way, Bai Xiaowen said solemnly. Let's end this quickly. Mengjin was not far from the Guandu battlefield. Yinjin, the westernmost part of the Guandu battlefield, was only 200 miles away from Mengjin. The main force of the Qiao army was guarding the Guandu front line, so Mengjin naturally had its main force elites. Zhong Yao would definitely inform Cao Cao about the location of the interception at Mengjin. Thus, after the Qiao army solved the Guandu problem, they would definitely send reinforcements from Yanjin, which was closest to Mengjin. This was also the reason why Bai Xiaowen had hurriedly marched out of Xi province, not hesitating to use Meng De Xian's speed as a crucial asset in war strategy. Once they were entangled with the main force of the Qiao army, the following Qiao army would join the battle and the situation would take a turn for the worse. Even if the White Phoenix battle team could escape, the 20,000 troops and the Emperor's officials would definitely fall back into Cao Cao's hands. The Wrath Claw under Bai Xiaowen raised its head and howled. The active effect of Heart of the Wolves was activated. All the allies were enveloped in a layer of blood-red light, greatly increasing their damage output. Bai Xiaowen also activated her Cape's command roar, providing the team with buffs that increased damage output and reduced damage. Han Su's body was suddenly enveloped by a layer of pale yellow energy, like a layer of invisible armor. His strength had also become incomparably great. With a raise of his hand, he knocked aside the Suzhou generals blocking his way. This was Han Su's new special technique, Gang Chi. It allowed him to gain a bonus of 30 points of strength in a strength contest. In addition, his equipment also gave him a bonus of 25 points. In addition, they were now backed by the Yellow River, so when they fought along the shore, it would be considered a water battle environment. Han Su's King of the Deep Sea equipment set had also received a double boost. He temporarily allocated all the attribute points from the set to strength. Now, every melee attack he made had a special effect of over 110 points of strength. Everywhere he went, he had the ferocity of a strength-type lord. Of course, although he was ferocious, his actual damage was far inferior to a strength-type lord. After all, Gang Chi and equipment's special effect, Tyrannical, only added a bonus to strength contest and did not actually give strength. Naturally, his damage would not be high. But now, they did not need Han Su's damage output. It was enough as long as he could disrupt the enemy's formation. Line up! Line up! Stop him! When Director Chunyu saw Han Su's ferocity, alarm bells rang in his heart. He immediately ordered his soldiers to form a shield wall and block in front of Han Su. Han Su raised his hand, and the crisp sound of a bell rang out. A huge phantom of a specter ship crashed over and hit the densest part of the crowd. In a water battle environment, the damage and stun duration of deep sea impact were doubled. The specter ship forcefully plowed a path. Han Su raised his hand and threw out the anchor chain wrapped around his waist. He hooked the stunned Director Chunyu over and smashed him with a wrench. Originally, this wrench was only used to slow down Director Chunyu. However, at this moment, Han Su's strength was too high. When the hammer smashed down, Director Chunyu was smashed to the ground. Blood flowed from his nose and mouth. He looked rather miserable, but the damage was not high. The Yuzhou soldiers around him immediately used their ropes and hooks to try to tie Director Chunyu up. Director Chunyu seemed to have been beaten into a daze. He did not dare to resist and was tied up by a group of soldiers. On the river bank not far away, the Emperor, who was watching the battle from the carriage, was also stunned. He looked back inside. I didn't expect that there would be such a brave general in the world. He's almost on par with Lu Bu. If this scene was placed in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, it would be described like this: young Master Yuan Shi protected the emperor's carriage and fought with the Chao army at Mengjin. Shi General Han Yang was from Yuzhou. He was good at hooks and ropes, and he was extremely brave. Yang led the charge and the Chao army could not stop him. Chao General Chun Yudao was afraid and ordered his left and right to block him. Yang roared, his voice like thunder, and all of Chun Yudao's troops were shocked. Yang threw out his hook and pulled Director Chun Yu back into the formation and threw him to the ground. The emperor said, "This general does not reduce Lu Bu's bravery." In truth, it was because the emperor had lived in the palace for a long time and lacked knowledge. Furthermore, when the characters of the three kingdoms praised someone, they liked to exaggerate. For example, in the original Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Lu Bu did not have peace after his death. Unfortunately, he became Prime Minister Chao's measurement unit of combat strength. If Han Su were to fight with Lu Bu, he would probably be beaten back to his original state. After all, Lu Bu was recognized as the strongest general in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. If he were to fight with someone other than Lu Bu, Han Su might be able to resist for a few dozen seconds with his aura energy technique. However, he would not be a threat to the other party. Director Chun Yu was also stunned by Han Su's aura. Otherwise, after being pulled over, he could have fought back and not been captured alive. Of course, to Director Chun Yu, being captured alive seemed to be a better ending. Bai Xiaowen's ears were sharp and heard the emperor's praise. He smiled and said to Qiao Rui, "Capturing a leader alive, this is probably the peak of old Han's life." Qiao Rui also smiled, "Isn't this good? While the Sizhou general is captured, let's move quickly." Bai Xiaowen immediately ordered the entire army to charge. The Sizhou army was in chaos and scattered. The Yuzhou army escorted the emperor and the officials all the way north to Bingzhou. Bai Xiaowen did not have the chance to use his second giant snake spear. After all, the Sizhou army in front of him was mostly normal. There was no point in killing them. The Black Soul Stone did not increase much. This was also something that Bai Xiaowen regretted. After all, it was a surprise attack. Yingchuan and Sizhou were empty and did not encounter any elite troops. Therefore, there were not many soul essences. Until now, the Black Soul Stone's growth had reached 8,300 and its soul essence had exceeded 4,500. It was not far from 10,000. After a few more battles, it should be able to reach the 8th level. Chapter 1259. The Yuzhou army escorted the emperor's carriage and the officials' carriages. After using an S-grade item, army marching strategy, they sped up north. 2 hours later, on the south bank of the Yellow River, a Chao army came from the east. The main general's banner was Li and the deputy general was Lu. They were the two generals under Cao Cao, Li Dian and Lu Jin. When they reached the Mengjin ferry, Lu Jin saw the Sizhou army camp that had not yet been erected. He frowned and said, "Has the Sizhou army been defeated? Why is the camp so broken?" Li Dian observed carefully and said, "To build a camp, the materials here are not enough. I suspect that this is Zhong Sizhou's plan to make the Yuzhou army think that they have nothing to worry about and cross the river." Lu Jin was energized, "Then the battlefield should be on the north bank. Our army should quickly cross the river to help." The two generals led 5,000 Chao troops and crossed the Yellow River. However, when they reached the north bank, they could only see corpses strewn across the battlefield. Where was the Yuzhou army? Li Dian looked up and saw a banner with the word Zhong not far away, gathering the remaining soldiers. When the two sides came into contact, Li Dian shouted, "Could it be Zhong Sizhou?" The defeated soldiers on the other side had already rushed over to agree. Soon, the two sides met. Li Dian and Lu Jin asked Zhong Yao, "Where did the enemy go?" Zhong Yao said, "They went to Bingzhou at an extremely fast speed. You won't be able to catch up. If you had come 2 hours earlier, you could have made it in time for the battle." Lu Jin said, "After we received the Prime Minister's orders, we quickly traveled 200 li without any delay." Zhong Yao sighed, "This is the will of the heavens. For Yuan Ben Chu to have such a son, it is truly an anomaly." Li Dian and Li Jing continued their pursuit towards the north. Zhong Yao dissuaded them. Even a desperate enemy would not be pursued, much less a victorious army. Yuan Shi also has the qualities of a famous general and the ability to observe the situation. If you were ambushed by him, your thousands of tired soldiers would probably be wiped out. Li Dian said, "We were unable to stop Yuan Shi. How can we explain this to the Prime Minister?" Zhong Yao sighed. "In the Prime Minister's eyes, your sins are smaller. I should be the one to bear the main responsibility. If the Prime Minister is angry and wants to punish me, I will naturally be the one to blame. However, I have already done my best and have a clear conscience." Bai Xiaowen, Qiao Rui, Cecilia, and Han Su were still discussing the battle of crossing the river while marching. Don't underestimate the native generals of the three kingdoms. Their ability to learn and adapt is too strong. I didn't even get to enjoy my deterrence for a few rounds before they found a way to break it. The Yuzhou army suffered heavy casualties in this battle. Our initial estimate is that they lost more than 2,000 men, Bai Xiaowen said. You mean the drum? It was indeed the nemesis of continuous casting skills. Fortunately, my soul rhythm was temporarily interrupted, so it didn't matter too much, Qiao Rui said. Do you think something like the Drum of Darkness appeared by chance, or is it a regular item in the enemy's camp? I'm not sure. But since Zhong Yao has one, I'm sure he'll have one when he faces other famous generals in the future. Even if we don't have the flute drum, we still have other means. After all, this is a three kingdoms playing with supernatural abilities, not a novel. Bai Xiaowen said with some regret. Zhong Yao never showed himself. He only came out to gather the defeated soldiers after we left. He's really cunning. I wanted to catch him by surprise, but I decided against it. I can't be reckless. Then, Bai Xiaowen looked at Han Su and said, Old Han, you're amazing. You became famous in one battle. I even overheard the Emperor praising you. Han Su blushed slightly. Fortunately, his skin was slightly tanned so it was not obvious. With this achievement, I can naturally promote Old Han to be a general. Previously, Xu Yi was the first to reach the top of the city wall in the Battle of Shudu. According to the promise, she would be rewarded with 1,000 gold coins and be promoted by 3 levels. She could also be promoted to a general quickly. Cecilia is the commander of a special troop of winged cavalry. Her promotion speed will not be slow either. Only Sister Qiao can't show her talent. She can only be promoted slowly. After settling down this time, she'll be promoted by 1 level first, Bai Xiaowen said. Since the goal of this invasion of the 3 kingdoms was to unify the 3 kingdoms, Bai Xiaowen wanted his teammates to perform well and obtain more war contributions. Then, it would be more convenient to have a more prominent military position. Qiao Rui smiled and said, I don't need a high official position. I can perform better as a deputy general. When Bai Xiaowen said that Qiao Rui can't show his talent, he meant that he was not as eye-catching as Han Su and Li Shi in the eyes of the people of the spirit realm. In fact, as the support of a large army, Qiao Rui's war contributions would definitely not be low. In fact, his contributions were even higher than Han Su's. The Yuzhou army advanced until noon and had already reached Bing province. As the high morale gradually decreased, the Yuzhou army, who had not rested for 2 days and 1 night, became tired. Currently, only the winged cavalry was still capable of fighting. However, they were now in Bing province and had already reached the territory of an ally. Naturally, they did not have to worry about encountering a big battle. Suddenly, the sound of drums sounded in front of them, and the army got into formation. The leading general said loudly, Who are you? Bai Xiaowen already knew about these people and immediately replied, Yuzhou Provincial Governor Yuan Shi, Sudu escorting the Emperor's carriage and passing by here. You are a general under my cousin, Gao Gan, right? Quickly come and greet the Emperor. Also, send someone to inform my cousin. A Yuzhou lieutenant carried Bai Xiaowen's Yuzhou Provincial Governor's seal and handed it over to the other party for inspection. After that general inspected it, he hurriedly got off his horse and bowed to the side. "This General Gui Yuan greets your majesty and second young master. I heard that second young master attacked Su Du and issued an order to punish the traitor, shocking the world. It is truly fortunate to see you today." Bai Xiaowen escorted the emperor's carriage forward. After Gui Yuan paid his respects, he started to talk with Bai Xiaowen. After this conversation, Bai Xiaowen found out that Gui Yuan was actually Zhong Yao's nephew. It was just that they belonged to different factions. This was also normal. Just like the Yingchuan Sun family, Sun Yu and Sun Yu supported Cao Cao, while Sun Chen supported Yuan Zhao. With all sides placing bets, no matter who won or lost, the Sun family would be able to prosper. Speaking of which, Sun Chen was quite amazing. He had once persuaded the original Jizhou provincial governor Han Fu to give Jizhou to Yuan Zhao. Only then did Yuan Zhao have his first base. Sun Chen was Yuan Zhao's strategist, and his position was similar to Sun Yu's in Cao Cao's camp. However, as their territory grew bigger and bigger, Yuan Zhao's weakness of being able to gather people but not use people became more and more obvious. Sun Chen probably saw through Yuan Zhao's weakness and did not plan during the Battle of Guandu. Instead, he went into hiding. After the Battle of Guandu, Sun Chen's whereabouts were unknown. After Gui Yuan paid his respects, he led the Yuzhou army to rest at the hookah pass that he was guarding. When Bai Xiaowen saw that the soldiers under him were exhausted and that the emperor and officials were unable to move forward, he agreed to rest in Bing Prefecture. However, Bai Xiaowen secretly sent Cecilia, Qiao Rui, and Han Su to lead the winged cavalry and rush to Jizhou Yi City. Chapter 1260. Bai Xiaowen sent out the winged cavalry. In name, it was to arrange for the Son of Heaven to stay in Jizhou. As for the actual goal, only the 4 members of the White Phoenix Squadron knew. After the Son of Heaven rested at Hookah Pass, he was invited to Tunliu City. The 20,000 Yuzhou army, after numerous battles, was left with 16,000. They were all resting up in Tunliu City. Bai Xiaowen asked Gui Yuan about the Battle of Bing Province. As Bing Province was connected to the Sili Cavalry Department and belonged to the Yuan and Chao camps, when the main forces of both sides fought at Guandu, Bing Province and Sizhou were naturally on the verge of war. However, as Sizhou was weak and Bing Province had Xianbei people, they did not have the ability to fight. As the Western Front battlefield, the Bing Province and Sizhou battles were not important. What mattered was the outcome of the Guandu battle. Therefore, while Gui Yuan guarded Huguan, Gao Qian, who was the Bingzhou provincial governor, did not remain in Jinyang City, present-day Taiyuan, Shanxi. Instead, he led his troops and set up camp in Shangyuan, about 100 li away from Huguan and Tunliu. The moment the Son of Heaven settled down, the Bing province governor Gao Gan received Gui Yuan's report and rushed over. Bai Xiaowen used the excuse of protecting the Son of Heaven to let him stay in the Yuzhou camp. Although Gao Gan's performance in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms showed that he was loyal to the Yuan family, Bai Xiaowen still had to remove all unstable elements. Gao Gan and Bai Xiaowen finally met. Along with them was his cousin Gao Rou. Speaking of Gao Rou, he was an amazing person. Gao Rou was good at solving cases and was a conscientious official. After Cao Cao defeated Yuan Zhao, he appointed Gao Rou as the spy assassin. This was a job that offended people, and Cao Cao wanted to find a reason to kill him. However, Gao Rou was hard-working and talented. After he took up the post, he worked through the night so that there was not a single case left in jail. When Cao Cao saw Gao Rou hugging documents and sleeping on the table, he was touched and moved him to the Prime Minister manor. Only then was Gao Rou recognized by the Chao family. There was very little mention of Gao Rou in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It was only mentioned when Sima Yi launched the Gaoping Rebellion to kill Chao Shuang. At that time, Gao Rou was already the Situ of the three dukes of Chao and Wei. She was given an imperial edict by the Empress Dowager to take a break and lead the military. She occupied Chao Shuang's military camp and played an important role in Sima Yi's path to power. This could almost be considered an inspirational drama. Unfortunately, Gao Rou didn't have any fame. In the Three Kingdoms, he was just an ordinary scholar-type leader. Beside Gao Gan and Gao Rou, there was a famous scholar from Bing province called Zhong Changtong. He was a commoner and didn't work for Gao Gan for some unknown reason. Prominent elder brother. Gao Gan was very happy to see his family reunite. He was more than 10 years older than Yuan Shi. He pulled Yuan Shi's hand affectionately and said, "Xianni has done great things in Liaodong and Shudu. When I heard about it in Bing province, I was also happy for you." As he said that, Gao Gan looked Bai Xiaowen up and down again, and then praised him. "You're right. The last time I saw Prominent was 2 years ago. Now that we meet again, Prominent's appearance and temperament are like two different people from 3 years ago. I really have a whole new level of respect for you." Bai Xiaowen's high charm played a role. Moreover, Gao Gan didn't have any enmity towards him, so they seemed to be closer. Gao Gan also had his own plans. Now that Bai Xiaowen had taken down Shudu and protected the Son of Heaven, the whole world was attacking Chao, and Yuan Shao's camp would continue to grow. As for Yuan Shi, who had great achievements, he would definitely receive Yuan Shao's support. Moreover, he was also highly regarded within the camp. Moreover, his uncle, Yuan Shao, had always had the idea of appointing a worthy heir. Therefore, he let his 3 sons each lead a province and observe the results. This second cousin, Yuan Shi, had such an outstanding performance. The possibility of him being appointed as the heir was much higher than the other 2 cousins. There was no harm in building a good relationship with him now. Of course, Bai Xiaowen could understand the thoughts of a normal person like Gao Gan. In fact, if it was someone with greater foresight, they would definitely analyze Yuan Shao's temperament and analyze that Bai Xiaowen might not be favored by Yuan Shao if he went to war without permission. When the situation wasn't clear and the news was unknown, they would be relatively distant. Prominent has led the army all the way here. It's very tiring. Why don't you rest and reorganize in Bingzhou? Don't return to Yuzhou. Gao Gan said excitedly. When Uncle pacifies you in Yan provinces, that old thief Zhong Yao will definitely panic. When the time comes, you and I will work together to cross the river and pacify Xizhou in one fell swoop. We will help Uncle complete his great task of unifying the north. The whole world will be settled by a proclamation. Bai Xiaowen sighed inwardly. This Gao Gan still didn't know about Guandu. However, Bai Xiaowen also had a reason. He tactfully declined, "Junior thanks elder brother for your hospitality. However, I can't stay in Bingzhou for long this time. The Son of Heaven and all the officials will follow the army. We must hurry to Qi Province's East City and stabilize the imperial court. This way, our army will be able to take control of the world. This is a very important matter." Gao Gan nodded in realization. Prominent is right. Following which, an attendant brought wine and the 2 of them drank together. Gao Gan wanted to get closer. They talked about their childhood and the bitter days they lived together a few years ago when the Yuan family had yet to gain a foothold. Bai Xiaowen didn't know much about the past. However, he was quick-witted and didn't show his cowardice. Moreover, when they sat opposite each other, he quoted from the classics. In Gao Gan's eyes, this second cousin brother of his had an excellent conversational style. During the banquet, Bai Xiaowen noticed that the atmosphere had warmed up. He smiled and said, "Elder brother, I once heard Father mention something." "What is it?" Bai Xiaowen said, "Father once told Jusho that he wanted to let Zhu each occupy a province to observe their capabilities." Gao Gan was shocked when he heard this. Is this true?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and nodded. Gao Gan believed him without a doubt. However, he began to ponder the reason Bai Xiaowen said this. Bai Xiaowen then said, "Although Father is in the prime of his life, among the 3 of us, other than third brother Xianfu who hasn't turned 20 yet, Big Brother and I are already adults. I don't know if cousin brother thinks that between Big Brother and third brother, who is the most capable?" Gao Gan hesitated for a moment and then said decisively, "Prominent is naturally the most capable. He led an army to attack thousands of miles, destroyed the enemy's capital, and returned with the emperor. This kind of intelligence is comparable to Guanlu. Bai Xiaowen said again, then cousin brother, who among the three of us is the most qualified to inherit father's great cause? There was a small trap here. Yuan Shao had previously said that he would let each of the Zhu or each control a province to observe their capabilities. Then, Gao Gan personally acknowledged that Bai Xiaowen was the most capable. Then, the conclusion of who would be the successor would be obvious. Gao Gan wasn't a resourceful person. Under the influence of alcohol, he blurted out, prominent is naturally the most qualified. Bai Xiaowen smiled and patted the back of Gao Gan's hand. If father asks, cousin brother, don't forget what you said today. If I can really inherit the family business, the position of Duke and Marquis will be left empty for cousin brother. Chapter 1261. After Gao Gan said those words, he regretted his slip of the tongue. However, Bai Xiaowen's promise gave him hope again. He couldn't help but think to himself, with second cousin's character and talent, it's not only reasonable for him to inherit uncle's great cause, but he'll also be the best one to carry it forward. In this way, it shouldn't be a wrong choice to bet on second cousin in advance. Thinking of this, Gao Gan simply stated, Shani, don't worry. If uncle really asks me, I'll definitely tell him the truth and support making you his heir. Bai Xiaowen nodded with a smile. Giving the position to Gao Gan was also due to the trend of the Three Kingdoms era. This was the era of nepotism. In addition, the knowledge of the people was not widespread. The well-educated children of aristocratic families were more outstanding than the children of humble families in most cases. In addition, the people of the Three Kingdoms era paid more attention to promises to their relatives and colleagues. Since Gao Gan had made a clear statement, he generally wouldn't change his mind unless something special happened. After this conversation, Gao Gan suddenly felt that his relationship with his second cousin brother had become closer, and there was a faint feeling of an alliance. After that, they talked about Confucianism and Taoism. Just as they were getting excited, a servant suddenly reported that a messenger from Jizhou had arrived. Gao Gan asked him to come in. The person who came in was none other than Li Shui, who had rushed back from the battlefield of Guandu. Li Shui, Team Channel Xiaowen, I have good news and bad news for you. Yuan Shao is dead. However, Yuan Shang should still be alive. The Awakened of the Divine Court found me and said that they would release Yuan Shang. Do you think it's possible? Bai Xiaowen, Team Channel Ha, they really can do such a thing that harms others without benefiting themselves. However, I've already made up my mind. Even if Yuan Shang is alive, he won't be able to cause any trouble. Shui, you should gather your emotions. The person sitting next to you is my cheap cousin. You should think about it before telling him the news. Li Shui lowered his head and wiped the dust off his face. At this time, Gao Gan had already asked, are you the messenger from Jizhou? Did the general? Oh, no, the great Sima send you? Do you have a letter? Bai Xiaowen set up a bridge for Li Shui. Brother, this is my subordinate. Her name is Li Shu. Although she was a woman, she was quite brave and resourceful. She was not inferior to men. That day when Sudu was breached, she was the first to ascend the city wall. There were very few female generals in the romance of the Three Kingdoms. However, in the spiritual realm, there was no gender discrimination. Powerful female generals were everywhere. Therefore, Gao Gan was not surprised by Li Shui's gender. Instead, he admired him. So it's General Li. Bai Xiaowen then said, after I took Sudu, I sent her to Guandu to pass on the imperial edict. General Li, you must have rushed back from Guandu, right? What information do you have? Has father already occupied Henan? Li Shui had already gathered his emotions. He knelt down again and said, young master, my lord was defeated in Guandu and died in the hands of traitor Chao. This news was like a bolt from the blue. Of course, only Gao Gan was shocked. He could hardly believe his ears. What did you say? Bai Xiaowen also stood up abruptly, impossible. Li Shui, do you know how important this news is? You can't lie. Li Shi cursed silently in his heart. With a sad expression on his dark face, he said, "Young master, this is a matter of great importance. Even if I had 10 times the courage, I would not dare to lie." Cao Cao's army was cunning. They burned Wu Chao's provisions, causing our army's morale to waver. Then, they used tricks to trick our army into splitting up. In the final battle, our army was defeated and hundreds of thousands of soldiers were separated. Li Shi briefly explained the Battle of Guandu. At this time, Gao Gan had already believed him. Believing it did not mean that he could accept and digest this news. Gao Gan was still dumbfounded. Bai Xiaowen suddenly slammed the table. "Traitor Cao! I swear to kill you." Then, he closed his eyes, kicked his legs, and fell straight down like a piece of wood. Gao Gan exclaimed, "Shani!" He hurriedly reached out to support Bai Xiaowen. Finally, he did not let the back of his head hit the ground. Then, after a flurry of pinches, Bai Xiaowen slowly regained consciousness. Gao Gan's heart was in a mess, but when he saw Bai Xiaowen faint in front of him, he calmed down and hurriedly advised, "Shani, my condolences. Right now, the situation in Hunan and Hebei is chaotic. We need you to preside over the situation. If you fall down again, there will be no more hope." Bai Xiaowen said in his heart, "I was waiting for you to say this. Cousin, please prepare mourning clothes for me." After Bai Xiaowen finished speaking, Gao Gan hurriedly ordered someone to do it. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath and said, "The hatred of my father's murder is irreconcilable. If I don't take revenge, how can I be a son? However, our army has just been defeated. If we want to take revenge on Traitor Cao, we must first stabilize Qi province and slowly advance. Fortunately, Traitor Cao has been defeated. The heroes of the world are all under orders to punish the traitor. He is busy stabilizing the situation in Hunan and has no energy to advance north. We still have time to reorganize the army." Gao Gan deeply agreed and nodded. "Shani's words are true." Bai Xiaowen said again, "The foundation left by my father cannot be without a leader." Gao Gan nodded again, "That's right. We must first have a backbone. Only then can we brothers work together on important matters." "Shani, this heavy burden belongs to none other than you. You must not decline." Bai Xiaowen nodded and held Gao Gan's hand. Confucius once said, "To be benevolent, do not yield to your master. Now is a critical time. Brother will definitely not yield modestly. I hope brother will help me." Gao Gan said, "Shani, don't worry. Brother will definitely mobilize the people of Bingzhou to help you." Bai Xiaowen had a long-lost feeling of excitement. Now that Yuan Shao was dead, the biggest obstacle preventing him from becoming the leader of the forces had been removed. Next, he would inherit the great cause and digest Yuan Shao's legacy as much as possible. He would compete with the heroes and conquer the world. Wouldn't that be great? Bai Xiaowen immediately gathered all the civil and military officials under his tent to discuss matters. Now his team had begun to take shape. The civil side had Sun Yu, Lu Gui, Dong Zhao, and Sima Yi. The military side had Jiao Tan and Zhang Nan. In addition, he also had to include the talented people from Yuzhou and Liaodong. For a warlord with a separatist regime, it was more than enough. But if he wanted to conquer the world, it was still not enough. He had to quickly recruit the civil and military officials under Yuan Shao's command for his own use. Only then would he have the qualifications to conquer the world. When Sun Yu and the others saw Bai Xiaowen dressed in white with a white cloth wrapped around his head, they were all shocked. Bai Xiaowen told them about the Guandu incident. Everyone's expression was different. Dong Zhao seemed to be remorseful, but he concealed it very well. If it wasn't for Bai Xiaowen's observation skills, he wouldn't have been able to see it. Sun Yu's face was still calm, similar to Lu Gui's. Sima Yi's eyes moved slightly, no one knew what he was thinking. Everyone first advised Bai Xiaowen to restrain his grief. Bai Xiaowen also swore to take revenge, needless to say. After the formalities, Bai Xiaowen got to the main topic. Now that father has passed away, the 4 prefectures of Hebei are in danger. Everyone is the first to know the news. Do you have any good ideas to teach me? Chapter 1262. Sun Yu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your inquiry. In my opinion, with the death of the commander-in-chief, the people of Jizhou are in chaos. A new ruler must be chosen as soon as possible. In such a time of crisis, who else but you can achieve great things? Moreover, you are currently on a patrol with the emperor. This is a heaven-sent opportunity. I request the emperor to issue an edict to bestow the position of commander-in-chief and the magistrate of Jizhou to you, as well as reward the civil and military officials of Jizhou. You will definitely be able to pacify Jizhou. If you can pacify Yi City, you will have Jizhou. Once you have Jizhou, the other 4 prefectures will submit to you." Sun Yu was a man of his word. He would no longer remain silent on matters that did not involve fighting against Cao Cao. Matters that did not involve fighting against Cao Cao meant that Sun Yu would not help in the battle against Cao Cao. Don't argue and say that helping Bai Xiao and unify Hebei would make him Cao Cao's enemy. Dong Zhao quickly calmed down. Yuan Shao was dead, and Yuan Chao's position had changed. It was too late to regret now. He could only follow Yuan Shi to the end. Fortunately, Yuan Shi looked like a man of great talent and strategy. He could be the Lord's assistant. Dong Zhao said, "Jizhou has a population of 5 million. The people are rich and it is the foundation of Hebei. The commander-in-chief's foundation was built on it. Lord Sun is right. You should enter Ji province as soon as possible, lest something unexpected happens." Dong Zhao's attitude was very clear when he called him Lord. Gao Gan came to his senses and immediately stepped forward. He cupped his hands and said, "Lord, Bingzhou has tens of thousands of soldiers. As long as you give the order, I will charge into Jizhou and help you inherit your great cause." Gao Gan was expressing his loyalty and changing his tone. Since Yuan Shao was dead, everyone had to respect Yuan Shi to inherit the great cause. Therefore, the original young master naturally had to be upgraded to Lord. Li Shi muttered softly. She felt that young master sounded better. However, Bai Xiaowen gladly accepted it. When Sun Yu and the other civil and military officials heard Gao Gan's declaration of loyalty, their admiration for Bai Xiaowen deepened. Who would have thought that Yuan Shi had already subdued the Bing province provincial governor? With the support of the higher officials, even if they had to resort to force, the possibility of pacifying Jizhou would be greatly increased. Bai Xiaowen's attitude toward Gao Gan was still quite respectful. He said, "Elder brother is guarding Bing province, you still need to guard against Zhongyao of Si province and Xianbei of the north. You must not act rashly. You just need to order Gui Yuan to lead 10,000 troops and follow me east to Jizhou." Gui Yuan led 10,000 soldiers of the Bing province army and Bai Xiaowen's Yuzhou army to escort the emperor into Ji province at the same time. In fact, this was a clear enough statement. Yuan Shang and Yuan Tan could see the attitude of the Bing province governor from these 10,000 soldiers. Next, Bai Xiaowen paid his respects to the emperor. It was another tearful performance, needless to say. Emperor Lu Xiao was also a little confused. What's going on? Where's my newly appointed Grand Marshal? It was there just a moment ago, and it was such a big lump. How could it be gone just like that? After the initial shock, there was a wave of panic. Originally, they thought that Cao Cao would be done for. They did not expect that Yuan Shao would be the first one to kick the bucket. This way, Cao Cao would be able to eliminate the Yuan family. When the time came, he would fall into Cao Cao's hands. When he thought of the imperial edict he had issued, the emperor felt weak in his heart. He could only place his hopes on Yuan Shi to turn the situation around. Yuan Shi's strategic performance was obvious to all. If he wanted to inherit his father's position, sure. Ji province governor? Sure. The emperor very generously issued an edict. Other than mourning for the late Grand Marshal Yuan Shao, the main point was that Bai Xiaowen would inherit the position of Grand Marshal. He would also have the right to establish a prefecture, that's right, become the magistrate of Ji province, and be in charge of Ji, Qing, Yu, and Bing. From North conquering general to Grand Marshal, even 3 levels were not enough to describe it. However, this was a special period, so it could not be compared to normal situations. Apart from that, based on Sun Yu's suggestion, Bai Xiaowen asked the emperor to give all the important civil and military officials in Ji province, be it good or bad, including Tianfeng, Zhushou, Xinpei, Zhangyi, Gaolan, Jianitsu, Han Meng, and the like. Here, Guanyi Marquis was different from other county marquis, village marquis, and village marquis. They did not have any land and only had a certificate to represent that they had entered the noble circle. In the Han dynasty, there was a rule that one could not be given a marquis without military merits. However, it was only in name now. As for Tianfeng, Bai Xiaowen naturally wanted to give him a title. However, it was not the right time to do so as it would show that he was biased. As such, he could only treat them all equally. Apart from the Ji province officials, the Qing province officials were also promoted. Bai Xiaowen's actions were to reduce the resistance of Yuan Shang and Yuan Tan to ensure a smooth transition of power. Even Fengji and Guotu were rewarded. Now was the time to win over the hearts of the people. As such, the emperor had to be tolerant of such people. They might not be able to help him achieve things, but they could cause problems. Feng Ji and Guotu were assisting Yuan Shang and Yuan Tan respectively. If they didn't reward them, they would definitely realize that the second young master Yuan Shi hated them. What would they do? Of course, they would encourage Yuan Shang and Yuan Tan to fight for power. Although Yuan Shang lost in Guandu, Cao Cao did not have the ability to expand his gains. As such, the 4 provinces of Hebei still had strength. However, if an internal war broke out, it would definitely affect Bai Xiaowen's strategy. Of course, even if he rewarded them, it might not be a smooth transition. However, Bai Xiaowen had to do that. This was the benefit of having the Son of Heaven in his hands. It was like opening a bank and having the power to print money. He could give out official positions freely, and the other banks could only look up to him. Bai Xiaowen fulfilled half of his promise to Gao Gan, giving him the title of General of Swift Cavalry and Governor of Bing Province. This was a position below the 3 ministers, second only to the Great General. As for the 2 brothers, Bai Xiaowen still wanted to maintain harmony on the surface. He gave Yuan Tan the title of Front General and Yuan Shang the title of Right General. However, Qingzhou and Ji Province could not be handed over to the 2 brothers. He ordered them to meet the Son of Heaven to thank him. After obtaining this imperial edict, Bai Xiaowen immediately felt that his waist was strengthened. The officials and generals under him were not given official positions. However, these officials and generals were not disappointed. They had good foresight, so of course, they would not be interested in the imperial court. As the Minister of War, Yuan Shi established his own office. Becoming an official under the Minister of War was a true trusted aid. Be it in terms of power or future, it was far better than being an official in the declining imperial court. The Yuzhou army rested for a night before heading east the next day. They escorted the emperor's carriage and rushed to Yi City. Ji province was vast, but Yi City's location was a little special. It was in Wei Prefecture, southwest of Ji province. It was less than 200 miles away from Tunliu City, where Bai Xiaowen set off from. Of course, the exact distance could not be calculated in a straight line. Some places were mountainous, so one had to take a detour. They set off in the morning. After passing through Uguan and Lu City, Bai Xiaowen led his troops into Wei Prefecture. Chapter 1263. After entering Wei County, they first passed by Shi County, where the officials greeted them. Bai Xiaowen asked the county magistrate about the situation in Jizhou. The county magistrate replied, after the great Sima passed away, the 3rd young master, Yuan Shang, and the military advisor, Fengji, came to Liang and passed down the great Sima's will to make the 3rd young master the heir and inherit the throne. All the officials in Jizhou received the will, but most of them were hesitant and didn't know if it was true or false. Bai Xiaowen's face showed a hint of mockery. Does my third brother really think he's popular? Passing down a fake will and trying to steal my father's position, what a joke. The current situation was different from the romance of the Three Kingdoms. Originally, Yuan Shang had relied on his good looks and his strength as a second-rate general to inherit Yuan Shao's legacy with the title of establishing a virtuous man. But now, with Yuan Shi's sudden appearance, Yuan Shang wouldn't have a chance to become a sage. The officials in Qizhou hesitated and didn't dare to accept the order, mainly because they doubted the authenticity of the will. Dong Zhao, who was beside him, scolded the county magistrate. The second young master has received the emperor's imperial edict to be the great Sima and the governor of Qizhou, inheriting the throne. Since you are the county magistrate of this city, quickly greet him. The county magistrate hurriedly bowed again. Bai Xiaowen said gently, you may dispense with the formalities. Did my third brother make any other moves? The county magistrate said, I don't know how, but he managed to persuade Liang's general, General Jian Yixiu, and gathered many of the defeated soldiers from the Battle of Guandu. It's said that there are 100,000 of them, and they're heading towards Yi City. Dong Zhao immediately said, My lord, Yuan Shang's lack of reputation makes up for it with military force. Everywhere he goes, the officials in Qizhou fear his military might and can only listen to his orders. Who's in charge of Yi City now? The county magistrate said, there's another person in charge of investigating. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, I know about the interrogation of this person. He and Fingji have always assisted the third brother, Yuan Shang. My late father had two strategists, Xian Ping and Gua Tu, who assisted my brother, Yuan Tan. Dong Zhao said, it seems that Yi City is almost defenseless against Yuan Shang. My lord should make a decision early. Bai Xiaowen said, I have my own plans. While they were talking, a group of 10 cavalrymen suddenly appeared. They were all wearing excellent iron armor, and they galloped over on their horses. Bai Xiaowen recognized them as the winged cavalry he had sent out. He smiled and said, there's a messenger from Yi City. The sound of horse hooves stopped abruptly. 10 winged cavalrymen got off their horses and knelt down, presenting a secret letter. Bai Xiaowen directly opened the letter. After reading it, he smiled and said, when we first arrived in Bing province, I sent my subordinates Qiao Rui, Han Yang, and Bai Sanyang to lead the winged cavalry to Yi City. My goal was to report to my father and clear out a residence for the emperor. Although Qiao Rui is a female general, she is decisive and has the demeanor of a general. When she received the bad news of her father's death, she immediately led the winged cavalry to Qizhou's prison to rescue Tianfeng. With Tianfeng's call, all the soldiers and civilians in Yi City submitted wholeheartedly. Even though he had the intention to mobilize troops, no one responded. Currently, he was under house arrest. Yi City is already in my hands. Tianfeng's reputation was much higher than Qian Rui's. The officials and generals beside him were both surprised and delighted. Some praised General Qiao for her decisiveness, while some congratulated Yuan Shi for his good fortune. Only Sun squinted his eyes and looked at Bai Xiaowen for a while, deep in thought. Bai Xiaowen knew that he could not hide it from Sun. All of this planning, including using the emperor's name to enter Yi City, releasing Tianfeng after the news of Yuan Shao's death, and putting him under house arrest for interrogation, were all his plans. However, there was nothing weird about this. From the Xizhou army trying their best to stop them, a smart person would be able to guess that the Battle of Guandu was not good for the Yuan army. If the Yuan army lost, would Yuan Shao be able to survive? It was hard to say who would do it. Hence, from Sun's point of view, Bai Xiaowen sent the winged cavalry into Yi City to set things up in advance. If Yuan Shao was still alive, then the winged cavalry's mission was to clear out a residence for the emperor. If Yuan Shao was dead, then the winged cavalry's mission would naturally change. No matter what, it was difficult for Sun to guess that Bai Xiaowen had foreseen Yuan Shao's death because he did not know about the existence of Awakeners or the Divine Court. This was a limitation caused by the asymmetry of information, not because Sun was not wise enough. However, in Sun's eyes, it seemed that Yuan Shi was wise enough to communicate with ghosts and gods. Was this person really only in his 20s? Aside from Sun's shock, there was another piece of news in Qiao Rui's letter, which was about his eldest son, Yuan Tan. After the Battle of Guandu, Guatu originally wanted to join Yuan Shao, but he did not expect Yuan Shao to be defeated. After thinking about it, he decided to go east to Qingzhou and continue to assist Yuan Tan. With the support of Xian Peng and Guatu, Yuan Tan called himself the Great General and led 30,000 soldiers into Qinghe County, or Qinghe Country, in the east of Jizhou. Yuan Tan also rushed forward and did not stop in Qinghe County. Instead, he went west. According to Qiao Rui's calculations, Yuan Tan's Qingzhou army would enter Jiulu County tomorrow at the latest. Their next target would naturally be Yi City in Wei County. The three sons split up. Thinking back to the romance of the Three Kingdoms, Bai Xiaowen felt a little emotional. Actually, after the Battle of Guandu, Hebei's foundation was not damaged. After all, Jizhou was too rich and had a large population. Apart from that, about 100,000 of the Yuan army died in Guandu. The rest followed the generals and fled. According to the romance of the Three Kingdoms, when the news of Yuan Shao being alive spread out, the scattered soldiers gathered together. Together with the reinforcements from Yuzhou, Qingzhou, and Bingzhou, there were still 200,000 to 300,000 soldiers. In terms of military strength, it was enough to compete with Cao Cao. Moreover, Cao Cao needed to go back to stabilize the situation and could not chase after them. Of course, in Cao Cao's eyes, since Yuan Shao was dead, the three sons would definitely fight for the family business. As the saying goes, if you attack with troops, you have to face the enemy together. If you are anxious, you can't rush. If you slow down, you have to plan. Once the Yuan family fought and their strength was depleted, Cao Cao would stabilize Hunan. Then, he would cross the Yellow River to attack. This would save him a lot of effort. Bai Xiaowen knew that now was not the time to be stingy with items. He once again used Minda's new book strategy to speed up the troops and rush to Yi City. When the sun was about to set, they arrived at the Yi City gates. Qiao Rui led the troops to guard Yi City. After checking, he opened the city gates. Tianfeng led the Yi City civil servants and generals to kneel on the side. Actually, this time, they did not kneel purely for Bai Xiaowen. Instead, they kneeled to welcome the emperor. When the Emperor Lu Xia saw this on the carriage, he was delighted. The messenger read out the edict and gave Yuan Shi the title of Commander-in-Chief and Jizhou Magistrate, inheriting his father's position. The Jizhou civil servants and generals were all rewarded. The negative impact of Yuan Shao's death on the hearts of the people was reduced by half. Moreover, they were all happy that they were promoted. After the edict was read, Bai Xiaowen saw Tianfeng and said emotionally, "Without your help, how could I easily take down Shudu and welcome back the emperor? If we did not take down Shudu and stabilize Cao Cao's rear, he would definitely attack Jizhou. My entire family would not be able to keep their lives." Tianfeng did not take the credit and said, "This is the genius of the young master. I am just doing my best." Bai Xiaowen immediately asked for the emperor's permission. He told him that when Tianfeng was in prison, his entire family gave up everything to help him sneak attack Shudu. He asked the emperor to reward him with land. Tianfeng firmly refused. "At this time, Jizhou is not settled. You don't have to rush to reward me. This is to prevent the officials outside from being jealous." Bai Xiaowen said, "You have a noble character. However, those who have done well have to be rewarded." Hence, he ordered Qiao Rui to inspect the treasury and gave the Jiulu Tian family 100 gold, 2,400 silver. When Hebei was settled, they would discuss the matter of promoting him. Chapter 1264. Bai Xiaowen escorted the emperor's carriage into Yi City. From then on, Yi City was officially renamed Yi Capital. Bai Xiaowen then mobilized the soldiers to work with the craftsmen to build a palace north of the general's manor. He also rebuilt the ancestral temple and the provincial government. Although the people of the spiritual realm had better physiques than normal people and could build the palace faster, things were too rushed and they couldn't build it in such a short time. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen decided to first vacate the general's manor and use it as a temporary palace for the emperor to stay in. Bai Xiaowen entered the general's manor and met with Madame Lu to discuss this matter. Madame Lu originally wanted to make the third son, Yuan Shi, her second son, Yuan Shi, came with the emperor. He was in charge of Bing province and Yozhou's army, and his prestige was too great. Moreover, the civil and military officials of Ji province had just been rewarded and promoted. They were all overjoyed and had already pledged their allegiance. Madame Lu was a woman, so she naturally couldn't do anything. She could only advise Bai Xiaowen, "I gave birth to 3 sons, and I hope that the 2 of you would be harmonious. Now that you are the commander-in-chief and have inherited your father's position, you should love your eldest brother and third brother as much as your father and I do. You must not harm their lives." Bai Xiaowen hurriedly knelt down and said, "I respectfully accept mother's admonition. How can your son be such a harsh and ungrateful person? As long as brother and third brother are willing to accept the imperial court's title and don't split Hebei, I won't dare to harm them." Madame Lu sighed, "Why don't you be the governor of Ji province and let your third brother Xianfu be the governor of Yuzhou? Also, your eldest brother has been doing well in Qingzhou, and your father often praises him." Bai Xiaowen bowed respectfully, "Mother, you don't know. Father can let my eldest brother oversee Qingzhou, but I can't let him oversee Qingzhou. Brother is older than me and has the same seniority as me. Why would he be willing to be under me? Over time, it will become a source of chaos. When that time comes, it will be difficult for the brothers to fight each other, and father's foundation will be hard to protect." Madame Lu wasn't completely unreasonable. Under Bai Xiaowen's persuasion, she reluctantly accepted this idea. However, she still said resentfully, "It's inconvenient for a woman like me to participate in national affairs. Shani, you're on your own. Don't forget your promise to not harm your eldest brother and third brother's lives." Madame Lu then stood up and left. The servants of the general's manor began to pack up and move to another courtyard. "How is it? Did you get scolded?" Li Shi saw the whole thing and said angrily, "That Mrs. Lu has a mean face." Her 3 sons were clearly her own, yet she was biased towards her eldest and third son. Xiaowen's mother's son, Xiaowen's mothers give her some face and let her know who has the final say in Jizhou. Bai Xiaowen waved his hand with a smile and said, "Don't be like this. Mrs. Lu is indeed a vicious person in the romance of the 3 kingdoms, but she still cares for her 3 sons, including me, the second son. This is normal as a mother. Why are you so harsh? She doesn't have much influence in Ji. Don't give her the bad name of being unfilial." Qiao Rui's face showed a trace of relief. However, he quickly hid it. Qiao Rui said, "Now that Yi City is settled, there's still a problem. Yuan Shang somehow convinced Jiang Yitsu to move out from Liang and gather the defeated soldiers of Guandu. He said that he's going to head to Yi City. Liang isn't far from Yi City. Yuan Shang should be close now. How should we deal with this?" Bai Xiaowen smiled, "I've seen my third brother with my own eyes. Yuan Shao once said that he's the most like him and has a heroic spirit. That's only half right. Yuan Shang is like him, but he's much worse than Yuan Shao. How would he have the ability to convince the Liang army and the defeated soldiers of Guandu to help him take the throne? I already have a plan. Come with me, Shi." Yuan Shang and Jiang Yitsu led 100,000 troops and rushed to Yi City from Liang under the banner of the new commander-in-chief. The officials along the way kept quiet out of fear, not daring to question them at all. When they arrived in Anyang, they were less than 100 miles away from Yi City. A secret messenger came to report. It was a trusted aide sent by Shining. "Third young master, Yi City has been taken over by second young master." Yuan Shang was shocked. Why did Yuan Shi come so quickly? Why didn't he help me defend Yi City? That person said, "Second young master sent out 800 elite cavalry as the vanguard. They traveled through the night and arrived in Yi City the night before. This cavalry unit was under the banner of welcoming the emperor and was prepared to stay in the palace. Hence, he didn't prepare for it. When the news of First Sima's death reached Yi City, Second Young Master's subordinates were one step ahead. They put Tian Biebe under house arrest and released him from prison. When the officials saw him, they didn't resist. Hence, Second Young Master's vanguard unit smoothly took over Yi City. Yuan Shang raged. Yuan Shi has never shown his talents, but he's actually so cunning. I swear to take down Yi City. Jiang Yixiu, who was standing at the side, started to hesitate. He had been persuaded by Feng Ji and Yuan Shang's wish to be promoted to an official. Only then did he have the courage to interfere in the fight for the throne. Originally, Yuan Shang had promised that Yi City's gates would be wide open and that the guards would all be his men. He wouldn't need to spend much effort to conquer Jizhou. Now that he looked at it, what was going on? The Second Young Master obviously had the upper hand. Should he continue down the path of Yuan Shang until the end? Just as he was hesitating, someone suddenly reported that Second Young Master Yuan Shi had come to meet him. Yuan Shang was stunned. Yuan Shi is here? How many troops did he bring? The scout reported, Second Young Master only brought a few personal attendants. He said that he came on his mother's orders. He didn't want to fight, so he came alone. At first, Yuan Shang was shocked. After hearing it clearly, he asked twice before slowly digesting this unbelievable news. Feng Ji took the chance to persuade, Lord, Yuan Shi is here because the heavens are helping him. No matter how powerful he is, he can't defeat our 100,000-strong army. Lord, you only need to set up a hangmen banquet and capture Yuan Shi during the banquet. Jizhou can be conquered. Yuan Shang said, I also have this idea. However, Yuan Shi came in the name of brotherhood. If I take the chance to capture him, I will definitely be scolded for being unjust. Feng Ji hurriedly said, Lord, you're wrong. Those who achieve great things don't care about trifles. Before Old Lord obtained Jizhou, he didn't have a place to stand. Fortunately, Han Fu provided him with food. Old Lord is indebted to Han Fu, but didn't Old Lord take over Jizhou with the strategy of a turtledove seizing a magpie's nest? If Old Lord was so stubborn, how could there be 4 prefectures and millions of people? Yuan Shang was convinced and nodded, that's true. At worst, after I take over Jizhou, I'll treat Yuan Shi well. Chapter 1265. Aside from Yuan Shang and Feng Ji's plan, Jiang Yixiu remained silent. He still disapproved of Feng Ji and Yuan Shang's plan. The main theme of the 3 kingdoms was loyalty, filial piety, and righteousness. Yuan Shao took Han Fu's Jizhou because Han Fu was an old friend of the Yuan family. As one of the twin stars of the Yuan family, Yuan Shao taking Han Fu's territory was like a master taking his servant's land. It wouldn't cause too much criticism. Now, the one who came was his brother, Yuan Shi. How could he be compared to Han Fu? For the sake of brotherhood, Yuan Shi went to the meeting alone. Although it wasn't touching, it showed his heroic spirit. In comparison, Yuan Shang and Feng Ji's plan was really petty. It was as unbearable as a smelly ditch. After Jiang Yixiu returned to the command tent, he couldn't help but sigh. Since they're brothers, why is there such a big difference? A trusted guard who was familiar with Jiang Yixiu said, General, what's so strange about this? Even the 9 sons of the dragon are different. In our hometown, the brothers from the same mother were born short and weak. The second brother was born with a strong appearance and extraordinary strength. Who can you find to reason with? Jiang Yixiu was deep in thought. Time jumped to 4 hours ago. Jinmi nestled in Bai Xiaowen's arms. Husband, everything that happened in the past half-month was like a dream. As Bai Xiaowen listened to Jinmi's soft voice, a delicate fragrance entered his nose, causing him to feel light and his bones to soften. Lying on a beauty's lap while drunk and holding the world's power when awake, this was indeed the peak of life that the ancients dreamed of. Jinmi continued. Father died in Guandu. It was really unexpected. The sky of Jizhou is about to fall. When I heard the news, I couldn't sleep at night. I was afraid that one day the Chao army would break into Yi City and take us away. But compared to that, husband's sudden appearance was really unexpected. Jinmi's eyes sparkled as she said, "Right now, all the streets and alleys of Jizhou are talking about how my husband single-handedly conquered Liaodong, annihilated Zhang Jiao, and launched a surprise attack on Sudu. Now that my husband has returned, I no longer have to worry or be afraid, because my husband has lifted up the sky of Jizhou once again. You are my white jade pillar that holds up the sky, and also the purple gold beam that supports the entire Jizhou." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "The reason why your husband can achieve all these is also related to the support of my beloved wife. If it weren't for Brother Xinyan's generosity, I wouldn't have been able to secretly recruit elites." Xinmi said seriously, "Brother Xinyan is indeed talented, but what he has done can also be done by ordinary businessmen. What my husband has done is world-shaking, and no one can replace him." With the beauty in his arms, Bai Xiaowen felt a little restless. He quickly calmed himself down and said, "Jizhou is not at peace yet. I have already sent someone to make an appointment to go to my third brother's camp and persuade him to give up fighting with weapons. Right now, Hebei can't afford to have civil strife." Jinmi had already heard this rumor. Bai Xiaowen had purposely released this rumor. Now, not just Jizhou, at least the entire Yi City knew that the second young master wanted to go to the enemy camp alone to prevent civil strife in Hebei. "My husband, you really want to go?" Jinmi opened her mouth slightly and revealed a surprised expression. "Of course." Bai Xiaowen revealed a strong confidence again and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I have already made a plan. If my third brother obediently gives up fighting with weapons, he can still retain his dignity. If he has any other thoughts, he will only end up in a sorry state." A man with strength and confidence was the most charming. Jinmi was infected by Bai Xiaowen's confidence. A trace of admiration appeared on her pretty face. "I am willing to dance for my husband." Bai Xiaowen clapped his hands and said with a smile, "When we parted that day, your flowing stream dance is something that I will never forget for a long time." Yuan Shangjuan's camp. Bai Xiaowen only brought a few attendants and arrived in front of Yuan Shangjuan's camp. A soldier came forward and invited Bai Xiaowen in. Bai Xiaowen said, "I have an edict personally written by the emperor. Quickly report it and let Yuan Shang come out to receive it." When Yuan Shang heard this news, he was helpless and could only come out to receive it. In this era, the emperor's edict actually had some weight. After all, it was based on loyalty, filial piety, and righteousness. When Cao Cao took control of the emperor, he used the emperor's name to issue an edict to reprimand Yuan Shao for only caring about his own territory and not the safety of the imperial court. Although Yuan Shao was angry, he had no choice but to submit a letter to defend himself. Later, when news of the edict spread, Yuan Shao had a righteous banner to fight against Cao Cao. From this incident, one could see the weight of the emperor's edict. In the eyes of Li Ju, Guosi, and the other rebels, it was worth nothing. However, in the eyes of the nobles who wanted to maintain their good reputation and gain the allegiance of the aristocratic families, it was extremely important. Yuan Shang came out to receive it. Beside Bai Xiaowen was the new minister, Dong Zhao, who read the edict. The contents of the edict had already been read out once in Jizhou. Other than Bai Xiaowen's status as commander-in-chief and governor of Ji province, there were also the titles of Yuan Shang, Feng Ji, Jianyizu, Zhang He, Gao Lan, Zhu Shou, and the other generals of Liang and Guandu. When Yuan Shang heard that he was given the title of Right General, which was 2 ranks lower than Yuan Shi, he felt really unhappy. However, under such circumstances, he could only accept the edict first. Yuan Shang only thought to himself, "After I capture you, I will enter Yedu and take control of the emperor. What I want to give will be up to me." After reading the edict, Yuan Shang walked up to talk to Yuan Shi about their brotherly relationship. "Second brother, you have worked hard. I have already prepared a feast. Please enter." Yuan Shang was afraid that the cooked duck would fly away, so he looked at Jianyizu. Originally, Jiang Yitsu should have ordered the personal guards to bring Yuan Shi into the middle of the army. However, Jiang Yitsu hesitated and did not immediately give the order. Yuan Shang was furious in his heart. Luckily, he had not wasted his efforts these few days. From the defeated Guandu soldiers, he had managed to recruit a few generals. Under Yuan Shang's instructions, 2 of the defeated Guandu generals, Mai Yan and Zhang San, led dozens of personal guards and took 2 steps forward. They stood behind Bai Xiaowen's group of 4. The distance of these 2 steps made the originally harmonious atmosphere completely disappear. Bai Xiaowen smiled, "Since I am here, how can I not enter?" He tidied up his clothes and walked in. However, before he entered, 2 of Yuan Shang's personal guards asked Bai Xiaowen and his followers to take off their weapons. This time, even Mai Yan, Zhang San, and the other generals were a little dissatisfied and frowned. Bai Xiaowen clapped his hands and smiled, "When brothers meet, why do I need to bring a knife?" Li Shi and Han Su, who were standing behind Bai Xiaowen, also opened their hands to show that they did not bring any weapons. Yuan Shang was still worried, so Fengji said, "Second young master and Minister Dong, please enter. The 2 accompanying generals can go to the side tent to enjoy the feast." Don't blame Yuan Shang for being so cautious. Bai Xiaowen's reputation was like a tree's shadow. The news of Bai Xiaowen riding alone in Liaodong had already spread far and wide. How could Yuan Shang not be prepared? Chapter 1266. Hearing Feng Ji's words, Li Shi could not take it anymore. "Hey, not only are we not allowed to bring weapons, but you also want us to be separated from a lord. What are your intentions? Third young master has an army, does he not even have the guts to do this?" Seeing Bai Xiaowen's subordinates object, Feng Ji calmed down a lot. He chuckled, "The main tent is where the 2 young masters eat and drink. The people accompanying them are either court officials like Minister Dong or officials of other provinces. There are no seats for the 2 generals. The side tent is where the generals gather." Li Shi said, "The 2 of us are responsible for the safety of my lord and Minister Dong. We can't leave temporarily." Bai Xiaowen waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I came here on orders. These 100,000 soldiers are my own army, not some tiger's den. How can they hurt me? Third brother, don't you think so?" What else could Yuan Shang say? He could only nod with a complicated expression. Bai Xiaowen ordered Li Shi and Han Su, "The 2 of you go and have a feast with my old subordinates. Don't be rash." After the order was given, Bai Xiaowen smiled and went straight into the main tent. Jiang Yitsu and the other generals saw Bai Xiaowen's frankness and then looked at Yuan Shang and Feng Ji's cowardice. The contrast was obvious. Jiang Yitsu sighed softly, "A gentleman is magnanimous, while a villain is sorrowful. The ancients did not lie to me." The guard next to him quickly advised, "General, be careful with your words. Don't let third young master and military advisor Feng Ji hear you." Li Shi and Han Su went to the side tent and saw the generals of Guandu, such as Zhang He, Gao Lan, Han Meng, Tianyu, Li Ji, and so on. There were also dozens of generals who did not know their names. Everyone sat down and drank 3 rounds of wine. The generals talked about literature and martial arts during the feast. Most of them did not mention the defeat of Guandu. Their conversation focused on Yuan Shi's attack on Shudu. After all, this was the only commendable victory they had against the Chao army. Li Shi and Han Su both had personal experience. When they talked about breaking through Sudu and bringing the Son of Heaven back to the north, not a few generals were spellbound. When he talked about how Meng Jin was ambushed and how Bai Xiaowen defeated Zhong Yao, the generals in the tent were even more amazed. Zhang He had always been a strategist. He sighed and said, "Attacking from 1,000 miles away, destroying the enemy's capital and welcoming the emperor's officials back. You can even fight from 1,000 miles away and go around several prefectures." Zhang He is impressed by the talent of the second young master. Li Shi said, "General Zhang, second young master has been appointed as the Minister of War by the Emperor. You can't call him young master anymore. Zhang San asked curiously, really? Li Shi was also puzzled. You don't know? This was due to the lack of information in ancient times. In the information age, Zhang He only needed to scroll through Weibo to know the latest news about Bai Xiaowen. He and the generals of Guandu would not be deceived by Yuan Shang and Feng Ji. When Dong Zhao announced the edict in front of the army, Yuan Shang purposely did not let the generals of Guandu welcome him together because of this reason. Seeing Zhang Yi shake his head, Li Shi sighed and said, as expected. Yuan Shang knew about this long ago, but he was disloyal and hid it from all of you. Have you ever seen Supervisor Zhu? Zhang Yi shook his head and said, after we lost contact with Guandu, we did not see Zhu Shou. I heard that he was captured by Cao Cao. Li Shi shook his head and said, no, according to reliable sources, Zhu Shou is imprisoned in the Liang camp. That's impossible, right? Zhang He and the other generals were shocked. Li Shi said, Yuan Shang faked the will of the old lord and wanted to usurp the throne. However, Zhu Shou did not agree, so he was imprisoned. During the Battle of Guandu, Zhang He and Gao Lan were framed by Guotu and were almost beheaded by Yuan Shao. Luckily, Li Shi informed Zhu Shou and he pleaded for them to be spared. For this favor, Li Shi could only take 10% while Zhu Shou took 90%. Hence, Zhang He and Gao Lan were grateful to Zhu Shou. Furthermore, Zhu Shou was usually in charge of supervising the troops and was impartial. Capable generals all respected him. Upon hearing the shocking news, Zhang He and Gao Lan couldn't help but stand up abruptly. Gao Lan said, let's go to the central tent and ask the two of you. Zhang He calmed down and said, wait. He looked at Li Shi and said, generally, it is not that I don't believe you, but without evidence, I don't dare to. Li Shi sighed, the two of you are strong in martial arts and my lord admires you. Why would he harm you? If not for my lord's arrangements, the two of you would not be able to return home. Li Shi took out a secret letter from his sleeve, storage space, and passed it to Zhang He. General Zhang, please take a look. What is this? Zhang He took the letter and saw that there was no name on it. He was confused. He opened the letter and saw a few short lines. The failure of the raid has angered the Lord and he will kill the two of you. If an envoy arrives, do not follow him back to the camp. Zhang He looked at the letter and was shocked. Where did you get this letter? Li Shi said, when Guotu sent an envoy to intercept the two of you, he had this letter with him. I followed the Lord's instructions and killed the envoy. I found the letter on him. Zhang He said, Guotu is a despicable person. He is afraid that we will confront him when we return to the camp, so he sent an envoy to say that the Lord wants to kill us. He is forcing us to rebel and bear the name of disloyalty. Gao Lan said angrily, I swear to kill this despicable person. Zhang He thanked Li Shi. How did second young master know about Guotu's letter? Li Shi said, my lord is well versed in Dao techniques. Even Zhang Jiao died in his hands. What is a small matter? Some of the generals had seen and heard of Zhang Jiao's level of Dao techniques, so they did not doubt him. Zhang Yi said, I am not worthy of second young master's care. Gao Lan said, Zhang Yi. Since the second young master had received the Son of Heaven's bestowment and had already taken control of Ji province, inheriting the old lord's foundation, he was also a man of great talent and bold vision, with a heroic spirit, far surpassing Yuan Shang's cowardice and cowardice. Why don't we serve second young master? Since Gao Lan said this in public, in the middle of the feast, it meant that he had already chosen his side. If Zhang He did not agree, he could only draw a clear line between him and Zhang He. This was the unique characteristic of the three kingdoms. Zhang He said, I have had this thought for a long time, but I need to see second young master before I can change my mind. Gao Lan was delighted to see Zhang He agree. He turned to the other generals in the tent and said, my colleagues, Hebei now belongs to second young master. Why don't we wait until the end of the banquet to meet second young master and serve him as our master? The generals in the tent responded enthusiastically. Zhang Yi said, no way. Yuan Shang wants to usurp the throne. Now that second young master has been conferred the title of Commander-in-Chief, Yuan Shang must be holding a banquet to welcome second young master. If we want to serve a wise master, we must go now. Otherwise, it will be too late for regrets. Gao Lan came to his senses and nodded, yes. I will go quickly. Li Shi was elated. She thought she would have to guide them further, but Zhang He and Gao Lan were even more impatient than her. This saved her a lot of effort. The situation in the Yuan camp could only be described as all rivers return to the sea. For such a situation to occur, it was naturally related to Bai Xiaowen's achievements and his series of plans. Otherwise, even if he had the reputation of being revered, he might not be able to get the Guandu generals to submit. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.